There's no time.
Lost. Times. Darkness. Tears.
The time is
13
o'clock.
Hey, you guys, it's us again, and it's episode 199. 199!
Yep.
That means we gotta do fucking 200 next week. Holy crap,
Yeah.
I have to, totally not even prepared for that
Are we
because I
still-
have so much other kind of crap I gotta do.
We still gonna live stream that?
I imagine we probably should. I mean,
Okay.
we'll probably do it, because we usually record these on Fridays. So we might live stream it Friday night, or maybe Saturday night. I'm not really sure.
Good.
And then I can actually put it up Tuesday on the regular time for people that didn't see it. So I don't know. I'm thinking about, because I still have to test how it's gonna work out with my computer and everything like that, because both my computer's really old that we use, so I'm not really sure how it's gonna work out. So we'll have to do some tests this upcoming week before we do it. But yeah, so on this episode, though, going back to the true crime, now this is a topic that has been requested multiple times, and I actually did I do a lot of research for most of the other shows, but this one I probably did more than any other show, just because there is so much content about this. I mean, there are books, there are multiple documentaries, there's news stories, there's just all kind of stuff. And I watched as much of it as I could, and read through as much as I could. I've watched all the documentaries. I watched, West of Memphis, the 2012 documentary. I watched the original documentaries from HBO, Paradise Lost. I read excerpts from the books of some of the people and everything like that. So hopefully I don't have so much information rattling around in my brain that I just lock up and forget what the fuck I was talking about, because that does happen sometimes.
We could always edit that shit out.
I know, but it's editing it just makes it take longer, and so I always try not to space out.
We very rarely edit anything on this show. A lot, so that's why this live stream, I don't really give a shit about live stream.
Yeah, it won't really make much
The
difference.
shows you've been
honestly.
watching are pretty much just a live stream.
I mean, like I said, generally the only time I will take something out is if I completely space and lose my place in my notes, or
You're
forget something, and I'm just
yeah.
wait, oh shit, where the
Or
fuck
if I have
was
to go to the bathroom.
Or if he has to pay. That's
Yeah.
pretty much the only, because he'll be pause it, and then he'll run off to the bathroom.
During a live stream, I'm just gonna get up.
Yeah,
Say,
he's just
I got a leak. It's gonna be part of the show.
I got a leak.
Yeah, take a leak.
You could probably just
I'll say it in my dad's voice. I gotta take a leak.
For the live stream, maybe we should both wear adult diapers.
Like an astronaut.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
like
just
an
the
astronaut.
astronaut lady that was
Yeah.
driving. You guys remember that
Astronauts just
case?
pissing shit in their fucking pants.
Well, what else are you
While
gonna
they're in
do?
a spacesuit.
It's you can't climb out of the spacesuit, man. It's that's gonna be a huge pain in the
Yeah.
ass. But yeah. So so today, in case I didn't mention it, we are talking about the West Memphis Three case. Now, like I said, I did a massive amount of research on this, and because it's very complex and there's just so many tendrils and everything. Now, I'm going to say right from the outset, spoiler alert, I'm of the opinion, as most people are, although I know that there are some in the other camp as well, that the three people that were convicted of the murders didn't do it. I'm pretty sure that they were innocent. I'm probably 98% sure that they didn't do it. Like I said, I know
They were
there's...
released?
Yeah, they have
Okay.
been released, but it took... they were in prison for 18 years.
God damn. Was there a lawsuit?
No, and I'll get into why that was later on.
I'd sue your fucking ass off. If
There-
you locked
well,
me up for
they
fucking
couldn't-
18 years.
They couldn't, because it was I'll get into that.
All
But
right.
there was a reason why they didn't. But yeah.
No
So,
restitution, nothing.
like I said, I'm sure there's going to be people that are well, what about this and what about that? Because all the shit that I watched online, because on YouTube they have West of Memphis, which was the one, the 2012 documentary that was produced by Peter Jackson of Lord of the Rings fame, who kind of got involved with the case early on and gave them money and stuff. It's kind of a case where I was reading all this stuff, and I was watching all these news reports and interviews with Damien Echols, who was one of the guys that was convicted. And there's one guy in particular, I can't remember what his YouTube handle is, but pretty much every video that's about the West Memphis Three, this guy will come on, and I'm sure he'll probably come on this one as well. in saying it's like, oh, they were guilty, and what about this, and what about that, and what about the other thing. But the thing, I was reading through some of his stuff, and I was just kind of like, well, a lot of the stuff that he says made them guilty wasn't true. Like, a lot of it was just like rumors or shit that they found out later wasn't the case.
Remember the guy's name who does this?
It was CMS something or Justice or some, I don't know. It was some handle like that. But every single video that I watched about this, and it was a lot, that guy had to come on and
So he takes the debunking of the case and rebunks it.
He's a rebunker.
He's a rebunker. Okay.
I think you just coined a new word. That's actually
Rebunker.
That's a word that we need.
Yeah.
Because that's like something that's been debunked. For example, you know, flat Earth. Okay.
Yeah.
Which has been debunked, obviously, like hundreds of years ago. But people that are in the Flat Earth Society,
they're going to rebunk this shit.
Rebunk. They're going to take all the debunking there and they're going to use it to like rebunk the shit.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
So, yeah.
And so that's I don't think I've ever heard that term before. So that's actually a really good one. There's another t-shirt right there. Man, we have so many shirts. But yeah, I'm gonna come out and say that I'm probably with the majority on this, that I think that that the 3 people that were convicted were innocent. In which case, you know, it's horrible enough that 3 little boys got killed, like in the original crime, but then these 3 kids who were teenagers at the time that they were convicted, their lives got pretty royally fucked as well. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to say 100% that I think I know who did it, but I have my suspicions, and that person is still walking around loose, so that's also not good. So we'll get into it. You know, I'll get into all the shit here. But we got a couple of shout outs. Got a couple PayPal donations this week. One of them was from our good friend Melanie, who sends us one every now and again, like usually once a month or thereabouts. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much, Melanie. We also got a new person sending us a PayPal donation named Amanda O. I have her as in the credits. Yeah,
she's in the New Age stuff. I was looking at her little. Isn't that the girl that's in the New Age?
I think so. Because she asked on YouTube like what the link was, but then she figured out like where it was.
Yeah, I think I checked to see who that was. She's got a couple of videos on like New Age fucking philosophies and shit like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's cool. So thank you very much, Amanda. Also, we had one of our patrons who before had to leave for whatever reason, Creepy Crepes, has returned this week. So thank you very much for coming back. Like I said, it's really nice to have you back again. And I understand that, like, you know, things are tough all over and, you know, we're not going to be mad, like, if you can't contribute anymore and stuff like that. Because, like I said, everybody's having a rough time, so.
World's fucking flying apart. And you heard it here first. I fucking predicted this shit. I predicted this shit years ago.
Yeah, but you always think that's going to happen.
It's part of my nature. It's part of my nature. But I can tell you the order that it's going to fucking fall apart. The next thing that's going to happen eventually, if it's not stopped, will be an attack on the power grid.
Don't give anybody any ideas.
They already know.
Well, yeah, no.
They already know.
Don't encourage it.
I'm looking online and watching them talking about it.
Yeah, well, that would not be good.
Yeah, that way...
There goes everyone's livelihoods.
Because if you attack the power grid, well, they're doing it against people that they consider to be their domestic enemies. Kill the power grids and starve out those cities. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, what else? Oh, I had one more thing, and we should probably do, like, I don't know if I want to do a whole show about it again, but I had a couple people that messaged me and said that there has been a new development in the Madeleine McCann case, which we did a show about a while back. I don't think they've arrested the guy yet, but they have a guy, like a new suspect, and they actually, I don't think they've named him. They're just calling him Christian B. But they did, with the first shit when it came out, like they had him, like a picture of him, but like his face was blocked out. But now they're showing him. So this is a German fella. And he was apparently, he had gotten in trouble many times before for various rape, child, abduction, child, sexual things against children and stuff. And he had coincidentally been staying in that area of Portugal, Praia da Luz or whatever it was called, staying in a house in that resort where Madeleine McCann was taken from. So apparently they've been trying to build a case against this guy for like years, and they didn't want to like announce anything until they were sure that they had like enough evidence to come out with it. So they just recently came out with it like yesterday or the day before. or a few days ago, depending on when you listen to this. But so we'll see where that goes. I mean, because that does happen every now and then, where they come out and they say this big thing in the case, and it's like, we think we caught the guy that did it and stuff, but then it kind of doesn't go anywhere. So, like I said, they have been building a case against this guy for a long time, and it does sound like he has a history of this type of thing. Like, he had been arrested previously for breaking into like resort condos and stuff in that area and like stealing things. So they think maybe that he broke in to this house, maybe not even knowing that the kid was in there, and just like broke in to steal something and then saw the kid there and took her. So we don't know how that's going to go, but a couple of you have sent me links to that, so I just wanted to mention it on the show.
Where did this happen again?
In Portugal.
Okay.
Remember, it was like a British couple, and they were vacationing there, and their little girl.
Now.
Yeah, they were eating dinner like a few hundred yards away, and they put her to bed.
You know what's funny is that there's a guy that was kind of doing something similar to that in this area, in Florida. He was a dude who would just go into housing complexes and look at the damn pool. And if there was a woman at the pool, he'd jump the fence, fucking pull a gun on her, fucking take her into the fucking dressing room, rape her, and then move on. He was a serial rapist. He started doing that, I think that was I think I first heard about it in 2010. It's here in Florida. I don't know if they caught the guy. But they got him on video.
Well, that's reassuring.
Like, they got him on video. Just African-American guy, just real nondescript, young, 20-something. You know what I mean? Because of his hairstyle and what he was wearing, I mean, it could be anybody.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's a generic look for everybody. There's a generic white guy, a generic black guy. He's just kind of a generic black guy. You don't see his face real clearly.
Yeah.
Just his build and his clothes. I mean, it could be anybody.
That's kind of the thing that I thought when I looked at the picture of this guy that they're looking at for the Madeleine McCann. I was like, he just looks like a generic white guy.
Yeah, just generic.
Like kind of a thin European white guy. Like, I mean, with his kind of spiky hair and blue
funny,
eyes. And...
It's funny. I mean, people just fucking look like anybody.
Well, yeah.
If you don't get a real close look at the face, it could just be anybody.
Well, that's why I'm always like really, and that's another thing too, and we might get into this a little bit when we talk about the West Memphis Three case. That's why I'm always really, really, I don't know. It just seems like eyewitness testimony, that's good. That's a start. But people, I mean, if I walked past a dude, for example, and then later that dude did something and, somebody came back to me and said, can you describe him? I for sure probably would not be able to.
Yeah.
Or I would just have like because I don't like stare at people's faces or like the detail of them or anything like that if they're not doing anything, to catch my attention.
Well, they usually ask you questions in a certain order to try to get a description because they know people are like that.
Right.
They ask you what race was he? You know what I mean? And then how tall was he? And then like, what did his, did he have long hair or short hair? It's like a process of elimination. They just keep going through it. What kind of clothes did he have? And a lot of times, if the questioning is done right, you could get pretty damn close.
Yeah, even if you think you didn't get that good a look at him.
Yeah, if they ask you the right questions in the right order, a good profiler can come up with real close to who that was. They'll end up with a drawing, and you look back, like after they catch the guy, they go, yeah, it's pretty damn close.
Although the weird thing is that sometimes too, like when they have a drawing or an identikit, if you're in the UK, of the suspect or of like a missing person or somebody that like a dead person that they found that's unidentified, and they'll like do a drawing of them or like make a cast or whatever, and it's like sometimes I look at them and I'm just like okay, but then they catch the person or they match the dead person to a real identity, and it does. No, some of them it doesn't look anything like it, and I'm like, how the fuck did you get that from that? I don't
Depends on who it was,
because sometimes like particularly in some of the cases of I think we talked about this a little bit with the Samuel Little thing, where he drew like pictures of all of his victims when they were trying to like get all this information out of him. And one of the victims that they identified, like one of the relatives of the woman that was missing had seen the drawing and called the cops. But then when they identified the woman, because they did ID her through DNA and everything like that, and they identified her, it was like she didn't really look that much like the picture. Not enough that I'd be like, hey, that's my aunt or that's my sister or whatever. It just wasn't close enough to me. Maybe if you did know that person, like maybe it looked a lot closer to them. It just seemed really strange. But some of them are actually pretty close.
Most of them I've seen that were pretty close.
Yeah, some of them though, I'm just kind of like, how the hell did they identify them for that? Because they didn't...
One of the ones I remembered is that they had a drawing of a girl. Well, shit, how'd that shit go? Okay, they found a dead girl in a locker
Yeah.
in an abandoned building. This is somewhere out in the Southwest. And she had long black hair and she had little moccasins on. She looked like she might have been Native American.
Oh, I think I read about that one.
She was mummified in there.
Yeah.
And you could kind of see her face. But they made a drawing of what she would look like when she was alive. And it looked fucking perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but they never could ID the woman. Although that's not really the same thing we were talking about. It's just that just came to mind.
Yeah.
That one case.
Well,
Did you see that?
The thing about it is that a good forensic artist, it's just like anything else. It's like, forensic artist, that's a very, very specialized.
Yeah.
You have to know like what that person would have looked like just by looking at the bone structure, and you have to draw
you could
them.
see her face. It was mummified.
Yeah.
They showed a photograph of her face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it was hot and dry. She didn't, and she was in that locker. Maggots didn't get to her. She didn't
She wasn't like decomposed.
No, she just dried up like a piece of beef jerky.
Yikes.
Kind of like those people that were sacrificed out in Mesoamerica. Sometimes you find them.
Yeah.
They've been up there for 500 years, but they look like they were killed last week.
Yeah, some of that's like really, really creepy.
really
Because some of
weird.
them just look like they're like fucking sleeping.
Yeah, like they're sleeping.
Even though the body's like hundreds of years old.
No, there was one that they're working on. That girl, she's probably about 13, pretty as hell. Just they choked her to death in a sacrifice. Had her up on a fucking little cliff on a mountain. Nothing could get to her.
Yeah.
And her clothes and everything are intact. Real finely braided hair and stuff. And she looks like she's just sleeping. It's weird, man.
That's what I mean. That's like super creepy.
But and I think she's 500 years old. That's fucking ridiculous, man.
Just goes to
Because it was super dry, real high altitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you're away from like bugs and
Yeah.
maggots and stuff like that, or you're somewhere where it's really arid and that you don't really get a lot of that.
And I think it was cold. She just kind of freeze dried.
Yeah.
You know? Well, that particular girl was just kind of turned into beef jerky.
Yeah.
You could see her face. It didn't even look disgusting. They
Yeah.
show a picture of it.
Yeah.
And then next to it, a drawing what she looked like when she was alive. And it just you can imagine that's what she would have looked like.
Yeah.
But I don't think they ever ID'd that girl. They don't know who that is.
It's
That's
sad.
weird.
I mean, that happens a lot because, like I said, when I do, research for my books and stuff, I put like a number of, bodies of unidentified victims, almost always women, that, they still like years and years have gone by and they still don't know who these women are. And a lot of times they just find them like on the side of the road somewhere, like in a ditch or like buried in a shallow grave. A lot of times it's like, by the side of highways because I think like truckers are doing that kind of shit.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Or they just get...
I think in a lot of cases it's the parents that killed them. That's why the parents aren't looking for
If
them.
it's children...
Yeah.
It may be, or their parents are dead, or they don't, or they disowned the person
Maybe
because
somebody
they
killed the entire family and the family was
Yeah,
lost.
you never know. I mean, you never know. They might be an orphan for fuck's sake. You don't know.
They kept the daughter for a while and then killed her later. But remember when they found that girl? She was fucking in a cardboard box, set on fire, had some bullet holes in her, and she was dead. That was done by the mom.
Yeah.
Remember that one, that psycho-ass mom?
Well, it's just kind of like, it's kind of like whenever someone is murdered, particularly like when a woman is murdered, most of the time it is, husband, boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, stalker, something like that. In, I'm just going to pull a number out of my ass, but I mean, in at least 80% of cases, and that's why
somebody that knew him.
That's usually somebody that goes for.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how accurate this is, but when I was researching West Memphis Three case, I will say that when children are killed, at least 50% of the time, 60% of the time, one of the parents may have been involved. So it's just kind of a thing where most people that get murdered, it's someone that they knew.
Yeah, and I think that explains why there's so many unclaimed bodies.
Yeah.
They don't know who that is because nobody's looking for that body.
Right.
They're not looking for
Which,
it because,
that's
because
it
the
may
parents are the ones that
did it.
Or the
I think,
husbands are the ones that did it. That's a lot of it. Not all of it.
Yeah.
But I think that's a lot of it.
Well, or sometimes too, particularly ones with, women that are just dumped and stuff. A lot of times I think maybe they were, sex workers or drug addicts or runaways or whatever, and that they just got picked up by the wrong person, and that person just killed them and left them somewhere. And maybe their families didn't even know where they were. Or
families didn't know where they were because they were always gone. And then the families, and then a lot of times people don't realize, children outlive their families a lot, especially in the lower income
Like I said, maybe
areas.
their parents are dead.
Their parents died, and a lot of times their parents die young because they're coming out of a damn troubled family, or the parents were in prison, so they don't know where the kid is. It's that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But so, like I said, the thing about
I just find it fucking. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just find it a trip that a person could die and there's never even a fucking complaint. The police don't even know that the person was murdered.
I don't find that.
And then,
I don't.
and
find
nobody's
that all that
looking for
surprising.
that person.
Yeah, I
it's
don't
just
find that
like,
all that surprising.
it's like it didn't even happen.
Because a lot of people just slip between the cracks.
But it's just funny because when you think about it, you think, well, if I fucking murder this person, immediately there'll be sirens and there'll fucking be cops. The SWAT team will jump out of the fucking shadows and get you. No, not really.
Nope.
If you choose if your victimology, if you choose the victim correctly, you can kill the person, they vanish, and no one even knows the person is missing.
Well, look at all
That's
the shit.
bizarre.
I mean, look at all the, kind of highway, like the Texas killing fields, Colonial Parkway murders, like all the shit that goes on, like up in Canada, like all those indigenous women that just kind of go missing and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, these are a lot of times, these are women that, not always, but, some are sex workers or they're, coming from poverty or something like that. And they're a very vulnerable population. So if somebody is, a serial killer, for example, is, hanging around this community, like preying on, those are the first people they're going to go after because, 9 times out of 10, no one's going to miss that person or they're not going to, report that person missing, which is sad, but serial killers know that shit.
Yeah.
That's why they go after those women particularly.
No one misses them.
Right. So let's so I did the shout outs, right? So let's get into talking about the West Memphis Three case. Now, so this all started in May of 1993 in West Memphis, Arkansas, which is pretty small town, very Bible Belt, which kind of will come into play much later on because this is as you'll see, this is 1993, but this was still very Satanic Panic time period.
I remember the time.
Because I think most people associate Satanic Panic with the 80s, but it actually went well into the 90s, especially in more rural communities like in the United States.
Yeah.
And that played a humongous factor in this case and why these particular teenagers were convicted.
I remember I was buying Christian death albums and shit from fucking the local record stores, taking them back to Fort Campbell, and fucking guys that were in the army with, they were like, what the fuck was this? There was still a lot of like
and this was
leftovers from the Satanic Panic. But I think most reasonable people realized that was all bullshit by that time. Most people.
Not in Arkansas, they didn't.
No, not in Arkansas. No. Actually,
not in this part of Arkansas.
No, there were still people way in the late 90s, I remember, in Mississippi, up in Gulfport, past Christian era in Louisiana, that still believed that shit happened.
Yep.
That there were satanic cults fucking snatching kids. That never happened.
Nope.
That was our first show on this show, was about the Satanic.
Second one
was about the Satanic Panic. If you guys haven't heard that show, go back and listen to
We should revisit that because I want to go more into... I want to specifically... I think we mentioned it on that show. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but I want to go back specifically and talk about the McMartin preschool case.
We are veterans of the fucking Satanic Panic. We were there.
I remember that shit.
That was a moral panic. Just kind of like the moral panics of today. And I think throughout history, man, the shit fucking comes and goes. Even like back in medieval times, they had fucking weird outbreaks of fucking people dancing themselves to death. And it's all this fucking... Humans are fucking a hell of a drug. Those fuckers are crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're crazy.
Well, they're very influenced by other people.
Yeah. Mass psychology, mass panics, moral panics, weird religious ideas coming and going.
And the more you don't know about shit, like the more you invent stuff.
They're inventing shit, and then it's like this synergy. And when I say religion, doesn't necessarily mean fucking Abrahamic religions. You have secular religions and cults now that fucking believe weird shit. Some of them are fucking have a real corporate fucking face to them. It seems like, well, it's got to be official. All you got to do is look at Scientology.
Yeah.
Scientology looks very official. It's very fucking corporate. If you didn't know what you were dealing with, you might believe that. Well, many of the powerful corporations today, like Google and all these, they're using those same techniques. And it has to do with power and money.
Well, I bet that's where L. Ron Hubbard got all that shit.
Where he got it
from. Like all that kind of like 50s corporate.
Hubbard knew what the fuck he was doing, man. He was a fucking naval officer. He was a very intelligent, creative guy. He could lie his ass off.
Also, nutcase.
Yeah, but you know what? How fucking crazy could he have been? That motherfucker had his own shit.
I've read a lot of his writing, like not really because I wanted to.
He was very successful.
He was, but he was still a nutcase. You could be a nutcase and be successful.
Well, yeah, but it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. He fucking
He was a
created
nutcase in a way that
It was very beneficial to
contributed
him.
Right.
It was very beneficial to him. He was a powerful cult leader, and people liked him. That's another thing.
And to be honest, too, I think, like, I'm not saying that Scientology wasn't shitty and scary back then, because it was, but I think it got a lot worse.
It got a lot worse. It wasn't
later
in his
on,
time.
Under miscarriage.
I'm very anti-Scientology, and we've done shows on it. We have the Angry Gay Pope on here. But I got to admit, during the times of L. Ron Hubbard, the cultists liked L. Ron Hubbard. He was nice, and he was a fair man. He was a good man.
It was a lot less problematic. It was still problematic, but less problematic.
Lot less. They were there willingly, and he was fucking playing all these games, and they were having a good time. It was a scene.
Yeah.
They were making money, and he was fucking weird, but he was a science fiction writer, and the dude fucking, and evidently everybody loved him. He would sit there and fucking tell you about what the aliens were doing on other planets, and take you out on a fucking boat, and do, you know what I mean?
About
He'd
Xenu
build all
and the
kinds
volcano and all kinds of shit.
And one of the weirdest things about L. Ron is that he was surrounded by beautiful young women, and he wasn't taking advantage of them.
Not that I ever heard of, which is very strange, because that's usually Cult 101.
Cult 101 is fuck those young girls and get mind control. And he was I believe, even though he was crazy and he didn't know, and he was bullshitting, he was a man of honor. And I got to give that to fucking...
as far as I know. You know what I mean?
Almost every...
you would think that it would have come out by now.
Everyone who was
like that had been
everyone who was there that defected from the church unanimously said, no, he was very trustworthy around women.
Yeah.
That women were throwing themselves
Which,
at
like
him.
I said, that's very unusual.
Very unusual for a cult
Because usually that's the whole reason you start a cult.
Yeah, sex and drugs. Sex, drugs, and money is usually what it's about.
I mean, 99.9%.
But evidently, young women were throwing themselves at L.
That's
Ron,
what makes it so unusual.
He was weird. Yeah, weird.
He was a very weird dude. Yeah.
Young women were throwing themselves at L. Ron, and he was very very straight laced and very.
Yeah, it's like that's so weird that I really have a hard time believing it, but I guess it's true because I haven't ever heard anything to the contrary.
Well, the people that defected from the cult
were
very anti-Scientology all confirmed that he was actually a good man.
Yeah.
And that he did not take advantage of women.
Yeah.
Which, in a way, is weird.
That is very weird. Like I said, because
that's usually what that's all about.
That's usually the whole reason they start them.
All right. Now, the new leadership's not like that.
No, not by a long shot.
You're right.
Yeah, like I said, it was weird before, but it's like after that guy took over, I think it just got worse and worse. And now it's just like a fucking, I don't even know what the fuck that shit is.
But the thing is, none of that shit's original, and a lot of stuff you're hearing in the modern zeitgeist of today, you have to understand is corporate propaganda. And a lot of corporate propaganda, corporations are cults. They're run like cults. Because they're run like militaries, and militaries are like cults. I'm ex-military. I've come from a warrior cult. I know what it is, but just because it's a cult doesn't mean it's bad. A military cult's run a certain way because it has to. What its job is to do horrible things for a good outcome. You have to have cult-like fucking behavior to get that job done. And that's with everything. Every organization out there has weird ways of doing things.
Well, yeah.
You have to achieve the mission.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's get back off that and get on this.
Yeah, because like I said, I was talking about Satanic Panic and how that was, still very much in effect in 1993, particularly in this part of Arkansas, which, like I said, this is very, very, very Bible Belt, a relatively small town. The weird thing about this town in particular, I don't know about nowadays, but in 1993, a lot of poverty, a lot of crime. This is actually one of the highest crime cities in Arkansas, at least it was at the time. But despite that, as we'll see, the police in West Memphis, Arkansas, were not prepared, I guess, just to put it charitably, to deal with a crime of this magnitude. So May 5th, 1993. There are 3 8-year-old boys who are all friends, Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers. Now, they played together pretty much every day after school. They would go and ride their little bikes or their little skateboards or whatever, like 8-year-old boys do. So, May 5th, they're seen playing together at around 6:30 p.m. And shortly after that, they disappeared. Now, so one of the boys' stepfathers, Byers' stepfather, John Mark Byers, he decides, since he can't find the kid, and he's like, well, they kind of look around for him. It's like, ask around where they are, and nobody knows. So they, so they report the children missing to the police once they determine that they have no idea where they have gone. Now, they kind of go around and they search anything, and they don't find anything that night. Now, the next morning, they start, kind of a more thorough search with the police involved. They kind of go around, they're canvassing the whole area. They start looking around this place called Robin Hood Hills, which was a place where it was kind of like, I guess it was sort of like this wooded area behind. There was like this big, I guess it was kind of like a truck stop in a way. There was like a cafe there, and like truckers would park there to get their trucks cleaned and all this other kind of stuff. And I guess it was like, like a wooded area or like some kind of ravine or something. And a lot of kids would go there to play. So they started looking around there. And did like kind of a shoulder to shoulder type of thing, but they didn't find anything again. Now, 1:45 p.m. on the afternoon of May 6th, this guy named Steve Jones, who we'll talk about a little bit more later, he was a parole officer, and he was searching around in this, this little creek bed that was in Robin Hood Hills, and he sees a little boy's black tennis shoe floating in the creek. So he wades into the creek and this is fucking horrifying. I could just imagine, like, if this fucking happened. So he wades into the creek and he starts, and it's real muddy, it's fucking Arkansas, and it's like, almost summertime. So he's, and it's fucking mosquitoes and shit like that. So he's like wading around in this shit, and then his leg catches on something, and he like kind of trips and falls backwards, and a boy's naked body like floats to the surface of the creek. So then they start like, feeling around down there, and the two other bodies come up from the bottom of the creek. Now, all three boys had been essentially hogtied. I guess hogtied is like when you do the opposite wrist to the opposite ankle, but this was like the same wrist to the same ankle, like behind in the back. They had been tied with their own shoelaces. They were all found naked. They found some of their clothes nearby. Weirdly, they found two of the boys' jeans. They had been like taken off. They were like inside out, but like the zippers and the buttons were still done up. Two of the boys' underwear, I don't think they ever found. I don't know if they found like any of the shirts or anything like that, but they did find the pants, and they thought it was weird that it looked like the pants had been taken off. They don't know if they took them off. Like maybe they took off their clothes to go swim in the creek. I don't know why they would, but, or whatever happened. But they had been taken off like without being unbuttoned, which they thought was very strange.
Something the killer did.
Yeah. So
he's fetishizing over fucking little boys' clothes.
Or something. Well,
I think.
Okay. So the strange thing about this. So, they find, they find these three bodies. And if you watch, I can't remember if it was West Memphis or Paradise Lost. Like I said, they're both, you can rent them on YouTube. It's only $2.99 or $3.99 or something like that. And one of the documentaries, if you want to watch it, be prepared, because they do actually show police footage of them pulling the bodies out of the creek, and like the bodies laying there on the bank and everything like that. And it's pretty gross. The boys were not, I'm not even real sure, like, what the cause of death was. Like, two of them, they think it was drowning or that they were beaten. Now, one of the boys, Christopher Byers, initially looked like he had been sexually mutilated, in that his, I believe his scrotum and penis were gone or mutilated. However, even though it kind of got around later on because of rumors and because of various other things that the boys had been raped, that was actually not the case. So
maybe fish did it?
Well, we'll get into that, actually. That's actually very insightful for you to have.
Now, time and death, all the same time?
Yes.
Okay, weird.
So, yeah, this is a very, very strange case.
It almost doesn't sound like a serial killer. Too many of them at one time.
I don't think it was. Like I said, I'll get into that.
Okay.
So, the pathologist, Frank Peretti, he did the autopsies, and he determined that Christopher Byers had died from quote-unquote multiple injuries, and that Michael Moore and Stevie Branch had died of multiple injuries with drowning. So, like I said, most things I saw said they were like beaten. I think one of them had like a kind of a wound on the side of his head. If you see the documentary, which actually shows the bodies, and you can get like, it's pretty, I mean, they're not like mutilated or anything. They were in the water for like a day, but you know, it's rigor mortis, and there's these like naked little boys, and they're just like laying on the bank, and they're all, you know, tied back like that, and they're like stiff, you know. They don't look like they're that beat up, but there are like some little marks on them that, and this was another point of contention, that initially the autopsy report said were knife wounds or from a knife that had been scraped down their skin. Although, like I said, I don't. Later examination like called that into question. So I'm thinking that the boys were tied up and beaten and then thrown into the water, and then they drowned. That's what it appears to me. They were not stabbed. They were not, you know, anything like that. There were no stab wounds.
How old were they again?
8. Another interesting thing about the crime scene was that they never could determine whether the boys were murdered there or murdered elsewhere and then dumped there. Because really, I don't think they either found no blood or a very, very tiny amount of blood, like at the scene. And, you know, they didn't really find that much other evidence either. I think they found like some very, very trace DNA, like on a part of the clothing, which, you know, may not have had anything to do with the crime. And it's like, you know, no footprints, nothing like that. So they were kind of stymied from the beginning. And like I said, this is West Memphis, Arkansas. The police were not really equipped to deal with a crime of this magnitude, a triple homicide of 3 children. Another thing, too, is that, and this, you know, had to do with, like, you know, the whole politics of the place. The Arkansas State Police offered to step in and help them and, like, give them some, you know, some of their resources and stuff. And the West Memphis Police turned them down, probably because the Arkansas State Police were at that time, I believe, investigating the West Memphis Police for various, I believe it was some kind of drug trafficking or some kind of shit. So they didn't want any help from the state, even though I'm sure it would have been very helpful, because as you'll see, I think they botched this shit big time. You know, so they let people like kind of stomp all over the crime scene. Like I said, they didn't get a great deal of evidence. And, you know, that kind of, and also I think that there were, you know, people involved who kind of had their eye on a suspect before they'd even done anything or gathered any evidence. And then it seems like they kind of built a narrative around that person, you know, and just threw away anything that wasn't of that narrative. You know what I mean? Now, they did look into a couple other suspects before the more famous West Memphis Three, you know, suspects who would later end up being convicted. Now, the first 2 of these was 2 teenage boys named Chris Morgan and Brian Holland. Now, they were thinking about these 2 because these 2 kids came up on the radar because 4 days after the bodies were found, they abruptly took off for California. So they actually, I guess the Arkansas police, you know, contacted the police in Oceanside, California, where they had gone and was like, hey, can you like snag them for a second? Because, you know, maybe they'd had something to do with this murder. So they brought them in. They both took polygraph tests, which indicated that they may not have been being completely truthful when asked about the murder, like if they had anything to do with the murder. Now, one of the guys, Chris Morgan, then later said that he was way into like drugs and he was an alcoholic, because a lot of these people were like paint huffers, and I mean, this is Arkansas, so a lot of them are like into meth and like all this, I mean, teenagers and stuff. There's nothing else to do. I'm just saying, there's like these teenagers in like this tiny little town in Arkansas. So, you know, and even some of the people involved in this case like admitted that they were like huffing gas and like all this other kind of stuff because it was fucking boring around there, right? So Chris Morgan evidently said that it's like, you know, I could have killed those boys. I have blackouts. I don't really remember.
Damn.
Now, even though that seems, you know, I'm not saying the dude was guilty or anything, but it seems a little damning. But it seems that the police didn't really follow up on that. So I guess the kids were just allowed to stay in California. I don't know what the hell ever happened to them. Like I said, I suspect that maybe someone else was involved. So I don't know if it had anything to do with them. Now, another weird thing that happened on the same day that may or may not be relevant, and they call this guy, who is an unknown suspect, they call him Mr. Bojangles, because
Yeah.
this was a guy, and they didn't find out about this until later on. This was a guy that, on the evening of the murders, which was May 5th, 1993, about 8:45 in the evening, the employees of the Bojangles restaurant, they reported that this black guy came in, and he was like covered with blood, or he looked like wounded, or I don't know if it was his blood or someone else's blood, but he came in there and he seemed like really disoriented, and he went into the ladies' room, and then he was in there for a while. So the employees called the cops. The cops came, but by the time the cops got there, the guy was gone. Now, so here's what I mean about the cops. So the cops apparently took some blood scrapings, because, I mean, the employees had to clean up all the blood because it took the cops so long to get there. Because, it's a restaurant and you can't, like, leave blood all over the fucking walls of the bathroom. So they kind of cleaned it up, a little bit. So the cops, like, took some blood scrapings from the wall of the bathroom, like, from the blood that was remaining. However, then later on, one of the geniuses at the police department lost the blood samples. So they never even got to check them. I don't know what the fuck happened to these blood samples. I don't know if he lost them on purpose or what. And like I said, I don't know if this was just like a coincidence. Maybe this guy was just like crazy. Maybe he had cut himself. Maybe he didn't know where he was and he just wandered into this restaurant and it didn't have anything to do with the crime. But that is something that a lot of people, point out. It's like, hey, maybe that had something to do with it. Now,
I'm not buying it because
that's what I mean.
A lot of weird shit happens
Right.
in big areas.
That's
all the
what I
time.
mean.
You could link anything with anything.
Right.
if
I
you're just
suspect that
talking
this
about
guy may not have had anything to do with it. I think it was just like a coincidence that he was just like having
yeah.
problems and he wandered into
Yeah,
this
you
place.
got to have a physical fucking forensic link. It's not just because this one dude was walking around. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, exactly. And so, even though it would have been nice if that one guy at the police department hadn't lost the blood sample, so they could have like checked it at least and exonerated that
what
guy.
their priorities were over there. They really didn't give a shit.
Yeah. So
I don't think they were fucking real. Arkansas. I don't think these were real competent fucking cops.
I would agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so it seems to me that right from the beginning of the investigation, they pretty much, because one of the boys' genitals had been mutilated, or so they made it appear, and because it appeared as though they had, like, knife wounds and stuff, or it looked like, and they were hogtied, like the way they were tied, and they were naked and all this other kind of stuff. So some of the people in the police department and some of these other people in town were immediately like, Satan. It's a satanic cult. It looked ritualistic, okay?
Now that's a huge jump.
Yeah.
That's a huge leap.
Yeah. It is a very big leap.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things... So, Steve Jones, who I mentioned before, who is the guy that found the bodies, and, that's not... I'm not shitting on the dude too much, because that's got to be super traumatic, like, walking through the mud and, like, fucking, tripping over, essentially, an 8-year-old boy's naked body. I mean, that's got to be pretty messed up. However, Steve Jones... who was a parole officer, and his buddy, Jerry Driver, who, these guys weren't cops, but they were like, I think Jerry Driver, what the fuck was he? He was like, not a private investigator, but he was some other kind of like lesser type of thing. These two guys were like convinced that there was satanic cult activity big time in West Memphis, Arkansas, so much so that even before the murders happened, these two jokers would drive around on the nights of full moons hoping to catch some fucking Sabbaths going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I've been watching too many 70s movies.
Right. So it's like, seriously, these guys are like the type of dudes that like took that shit super serious. They had seen like all those like shitty satanic panic, like cop training videos and all that kind of stuff. It's like, look at the pentagram drawn in the thing, and that means it's the satanic crime and all this other kind
matter
of
of fact, our second show, we actually did some excerpts from the cop training, didn't we?
I can't remember what the name of it
That
was, but that guy was like the horrible mullet.
Funny, man. That shit was so fucking funny. What they were teaching cops. You see, you gotta understand something. Police organizations and sometimes even military organizations will hire fucking outside contractors to come in and teach them stuff, alright? Some police group somewhere fell for this one guy. I don't remember the dude's name, but he had a bunch of videos made and a bunch of training packages made, and he would go around to all these local fucking county police outfits and sell them this fucking package of training. It was fucking ridiculous.
How to identify occult
How to
crimes.
identify occult activity. Fucking VHS tapes. Made a killing selling those.
Oh, yeah.
And then he'd get up and fucking give a fucking speech and probably give a couple classes on how to identify shit. It was all bunk.
Yeah.
I could maybe understand how you might fall for that shit back in the 80s if you were of a certain age. You know, too old to know better. Okay. But the shit they were talking about, a teenager of the time would just laugh at that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Really.
And it's just, it's sad to me that it took so long for people to realize, like, how bullshit that was.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, and I think I probably mentioned this on the Satanic Panic show, I'm not saying that, like, isolated cult-type murders do occur in the sense that, you know, somebody wants to make it look like ritualistic or somebody does that. It does happen, like, in isolation.
The Manson family was a cult murder.
Right. And I think, you know, that type of thing, Richard Ramirez, like, all that kind of stuff, like, it kind of contributed, even though I don't think Richard Ramirez was really a Satanist. He was just doing it to, like, be shocking and be like, ooh, look at me, I'm the devil, blah, blah, blah.
He was a self-styled Satanist.
Which I think most of the crimes that have those kind of trappings, that's what people are doing. They're trying to be scary, or they're trying to be. Right. And by like these kind of like older people, or like these kind of maybe not as well educated people, like kind of falling for it, you're just playing into their game. I mean, that's what they want. They want people to be afraid.
A lot of it had to do with the religion of the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Your local police department usually they were just regular church going, just regular people. They believed what they heard from the pulpit. Well, you had some guys who had a religious background that said, well, I'm going to fucking make money off this.
Yeah.
And come up with a package of training to sell to the police. And the zeitgeist of the time, it kind of fucking worked. Was it true? No, it wasn't true.
The FBI even told them that
the
wasn't
FBI
true.
would go and go, this is bullshit.
I think even in the early 90s, the FBI came and was like, look, we have found no evidence. Like I said, they do happen in isolation maybe.
Yeah.
But it's like this whole thing that you have about that there's like this network of like satanic cults like sacrificing babies and like all it's like that just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
It's not possible to keep hidden for that amount of time.
No, something that extensive. There's just no way.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you got shit like, and it took something like I said, the McMartin preschool trial case and like all that kind of stuff where all those people were like wrongfully accused to finally get people to be like, oh, duh, this is all fucking stupid as shit.
Now, could there be a group of guys, real rich guys that own islands, and fucking are they able to come down here to Florida and get a bunch of young girls to go to this island and pimp themselves out? Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
It's like, as far
That's
as like...
very different than a fucking satanic
that's what I mean. A
nationwide
nationwide network is very different than like kind of a small group of rich dudes.
Because we all know, I can't say it, but we all know that Child Island Man did not take his own life. Child Island Man did not take his own... I'm going to call him Child Island Man did not take his own life. We know that.
But yeah, so like I said, and we kind of get into this a little bit.
Right. There are groups.
About conspiracies.
Yeah,
it's like, I'm not saying that there's not conspiracies. Yeah. It's just that the larger they are, the less likely they are to exist because someone would find out about it.
Child Island Man was all about real rich, powerful guys. And this going to this damn island and doing these fucking hot young things and joining some kind of club where they all had dirt on one another. That's what I believe it was.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a relatively small group of people that had
a lot of power.
Well, that had incentive to keep it quiet because there was like a lot of blackmail material.
Yeah, and then once you joined that club, you were in the brotherhood, and then you were all working together. That's what I believe was going on.
But like I said, nationwide network of satanic cults having babies to sacrifice
at the middle class and lower class level. Fuck no.
I'm not seeing it.
Fuck no. That would only be a small group of dudes that had a lot of money.
And like I said, the more the square old people were afraid of the shit, the more teenagers would do it. It's like I used to do the same thing. You know what I mean?
Motley Crue with their Shout at the Devil album.
Right.
All that shit.
It's fun to like piss people like that off because it's so easy.
When your mom's telling you that that's the devil's music, then you go, oh damn.
All right, well.
I must be in with the devil.
So like I said, it's like, so these two guys, like fucking Jerry Driver and Steve Jones, driving around West Memphis, Arkansas, of all fucking places. Yeah. And it's like every time they see like a random like upside down cross or pentagram spray painted under an overpass somewhere, they think that there's some kind of like satanic cult. I'm like, no, that's just bored ass kids.
Yeah. Doing
that like to shock people like you because they know it works.
And just because every now and then one of those groups becomes the Manson family, it doesn't mean they're all like that.
Right,
the Manson family was kind of like that, but the Manson family involved having access to an old fucking movie studio, one. Two, having access to a whole bunch of LSD and a whole bunch of homeless girls that had run away to fucking California. That's how the Manson family
that was an aberration.
It was kind of,
that's why people still talk about it.
Right.
That's why people still talk about it.
It's an extreme case of teenagers.
Yeah.
Acting up.
So I think that, so you have to understand like the whole environment of the time that contributed to this, because allegedly, reportedly, even while when they brought the little boys' bodies and they were on the bank of the creek and the cops were coming and stuff, it took they didn't call the coroner for 2 hours. The coroner didn't show up until 2 hours after the bodies were found for whatever reason. And by that time, like maggots had already started, because they'd already started to decompose and stuff like that. So, and also I think that the first guy that did, the medical examiner didn't do a real bang up job. So a lot of the stuff that he said was later determined by other independent, researchers, experts, stuff like that looked into the case, was later determined to be erroneous. So a lot of the stuff that they used to prosecute the West Memphis Three was later found out to be bullshit, which is why they eventually got set free. So allegedly, reportedly, Steve Jones, the guy that found the bodies, he supposedly said when they were at the creek standing over the bodies, it looks like Damien Echols has finally killed somebody. Now, Damien Echols was a teenager who lived in the town, and he was, he was like your troubled teen, you know what I mean? He wore black, he liked Metallica, like he had long black hair. He would go around saying that he was Wiccan or satanic or whatever, like a lot of teenagers at that time did, like I said, just to shock people. He wrote gothy poetry, like all that kind of stuff. He was different and he stood out. And all the cops, this is a fairly small town, so all the cops knew him, and they suspected that he was into occult activity because he had some, books by Anton LaVey or whatever. Like he was into that kind of shit.
Yeah, what was funny this time, during this period, of course, this is the pre-internet era. Information didn't flow very quickly back then. It was real easy for somebody, because me and Jenny came from this background.
Yeah, and I remember this.
It was real easy during that era to not want to be associated with the mainstream.
Yeah.
So you wanted to fucking have your own thing. And the only other option were things kind of like, goth culture or heavy metal and black clothing and fucking weird writers from the past and Anton LaVey. That was our version of the internet. It was trying to break out of the damn mainstream thinking.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the kind of thing where, because you're now reading these books, you were going to go out and commit murders. No. It was like a style.
Yeah.
More than anything else.
And the sad thing about it, and particularly in the case of Damien Echols, who was seen as like the ringleader of this, even though, yes, he was a very troubled kid, he had grown up in extreme poverty. And I'm not talking about, we didn't have a big screen TV poverty. I'm talking about no electricity, like fucking dirt floor shack poverty.
Yeah, so of course that was his version of the mainstream. Would you want to be in that mainstream?
Right, that's what I mean. And he had gotten in trouble for fairly minor shit, like in the past, burglary, that type of, breaking and entering, that type of stuff. So, I'm not saying that he was an angel. He was a messed up kid. He really was. And, the fact that he was... But I have to say that he kind of had a problem that a lot of kids who are different kind of run into when you grow up in environments like this. Not just the extreme poverty that he grew up in, but also this kind of like real close-minded kind of town where everyone just like sees you as like a weirdo or a freak. And so I think that's why, like, you know, as we'll see later on, like why a lot of kind of, you know, celebrities, and why a lot of people, why this case resonated with a lot of people, because they could relate to growing up in these small towns and having everyone hate you just because you looked a little bit different. And he didn't look all that weird back then, I didn't think.
What's funny is, like, working class or lower class goth type kids were fucking rebelling against their version of the mainstream, which was just fucking poor people, really. Okay, poor working class people. They didn't want to be that.
Yeah.
In my case, I fucking came up around some of the richest people in the fucking world, growing up in Brazil, Escola Graduada de São Paulo and shit. I was rebelling against rich kids.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be like them. You know, I thought they were pampered and ridiculous. You know, so it's kids in extreme environments.
Yeah.
I was coming from an extreme preppy fucking school.
Well, I
didn't want anything to do with that.
I had it both ways, because I grew up, you know, really poor. But then, like, later when I went to high school and stuff like that, it was kind of with, like, more upper middle class kids. So I didn't really like either one of those cultures. Yeah. So I was kind of, like, trying to get away from both of them.
Yeah, I didn't want to fucking be like these fucking spoiled yuppie kids. You know what I mean? They wanted to go to these Ivy League schools. Fuck no. I wanted to go, at that time, I wanted to go into the Marine Corps and be fucking like Marine infantry. You know what I mean? Or Army or some shit like this, you know? I just didn't like it, you know? So my version of not going along with that fucking system was joining the Army and fucking, you know what I mean, listening to fucking goth music and shit. You know what I mean? It's just, it's if you're in an extreme environment, either one of those extremes.
Yeah. So I can see where this kid is coming from. Even though, like I said, you know, he had committed crimes, he did have some psychiatric problems and stuff like that, but honestly, after he got out, like, I've seen a bunch of interviews with him that came out, like, just in the last couple of years and stuff like that. He is clearly very intelligent, very articulate, you know, and I feel like, you know, I can relate to feeling, like, trapped in the environment that he was in, you know, wanting something more out of life and, like, and then, like, rebelling in kind of the only way he knew how.
Yeah.
So, but
extreme poverty and extreme riches are fucking two extremes. They're both fucked up.
Yeah.
They're both fucked up.
So
you wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
But no, man, fucking rich people are fucking assholes.
Well, yeah.
They're real assholes.
I think most people know that have had to, like, deal with them for any stretch of
of
time.
and man, I could go.
You don't really get that rich if you're not an asshole. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and they're thinking, and that's an older generation. They've pretty much gone now. They're dead now.
Yeah.
But back in those days, fucking no. If you had fucking rich yuppie parents, fuck, they were assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they bring in Damien Echols. Like I said, it really does seem like, allegedly, that, you know, Steve Jones, who, like I said, he's not a cop. He's like a juvenile probation officer or some shit like that. Him and his little buddy, Jerry Driver, they had just decided that because this kid wore black and liked Metallica and was into weird shit, that he must be the go-to, because this was clearly a ritualistic satanic murder, yada yada. So this is clearly, like, who it was.
Right.
So they bring him in for questioning, and, you know, like I said, and he admits this nowadays too, now that he's older. He's like, look, you know, I was a kid at the time. He was only like 16 or 17 or whatever. He's like, I was probably my own worst enemy, because, you know, not only was I, you know, looked all gothy and everything, but he also had the attitude, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you know, what the fuck can you guys do? And like, you don't know anything, and, you know, thinking he was smarter than them and stuff. So he probably didn't come across all that well. So they did question him about the murder. He denied having anything to do with the murder. However, so the polygraph that they gave him said that he was being deceptive. However, from what I have heard from all of these documentaries that I watched and all the shit that I was, you know, reading about this, apparently there was not, I'm not really sure, like, how you, like, report the polygraph, like, to the cops or whatever, like, because they bring the polygraph guy in. He gives him the polygraph. One, the guy that gave the polygraph didn't tell the cops what questions he asked. Like, that wasn't on record. Also, basically, all he did was just like, oh, he failed. Like, that's all he said. You know what I mean? He didn't say, like, what the questions were, like, what the answers were, nothing. So, basically, I mean, that's what I heard.
Probably
See,
fake polygraph.
I'm thinking Like I said, I'm 98% sure that this guy and the other two guys that were convicted did not do this shit. I mean, it's possible. I just think it's highly, highly unlikely. But I do think that because he looked like he would be in a satanic cult, that they kind of focused on him and then built the case around him rather than letting the evidence lead them toward.
Yeah, I know fucking some people are going to jump on us, but me and Jenny were there, and some of you guys can fucking attest to it.
I could totally see how this would happen.
If you were goth back in those days.
It was messed up.
You hear
it's so easy nowadays.
A lot of black people are talking about how the fucking the cops would pick on them. It was, yeah, of course, you could get shot and shit like that. It was bad on fucking goths, too.
I mean,
they thought you were doing something like sacrificing babies, and they're like, they're making it up in their head. They were just making it up in their head. They had
built a whole entire thing around... Yeah. I mean, like I said, Steve Jones reportedly, while they were like, they just got the bodies out of the fucking creek, and the first thing he said was, "Oh, looks like Damien killed somebody." Yeah. So he had already decided that that's who did it before they even like looked into the shit.
And here's the thing, you know what I mean? They're saying that just based on their prejudices of the time. Hindsight and fucking experience of doing these cases, me and Jenny done a lot of these cases, we know this kind of shit real well. Chances are it was a motherfucker they never would have suspected. The guy who probably did this was a middle-aged man who was married. That's probably who
I suspect. Well, if the cops had actually done their due diligence, I think... I'm not going to say that I know who it is because I might get sued.
Yeah.
But I'm not the only person that's saying that they're pretty sure that they know maybe who it is.
It's somebody they didn't suspect.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
You think they had a suspect?
I'll get into it.
Okay, it's usually the same race. Usually it's fucking, well, I guess you could. It's not always a married man, but it's usually somebody that they don't suspect. That's why
I'm gonna say before we get into it that they should have suspected this person.
Okay.
Like I think they kind of did maybe like for a second, but I don't think they suspected him till much later, like when more evidence came out.
Okay.
But he was a person that they should have suspected.
But he was just a regular townsperson, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. That's what I thought. He wasn't one of these weird goth kids or fucking...
How often do you see somebody that looks like a goth or a punk or a metalhead or something? How often do you see them...
They're not doing that.
As a serial killer, like they catch the serial... No, it's almost always like a normal-looking person.
It's kind of like a dork a lot of times.
99% of the time, it's just a normal-looking person. Yeah. Because if they looked like... And I've said this before, I was just like, look, you can't walk into a bank with an 8-foot green mohawk and rob the shit and expect to not get caught.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to remember you.
Well, if you're going to go and rob a bank and you've got...
You got to look like everyone else.
If you're going to go rob a bank, what makes you think you're going to go into robbing that bank with the 8-foot tall green mohawk? You must be a dumb motherfucker.
Well, yeah. And I'm just saying they'd catch you immediately. But like,
you better put a damn hat on.
Okay. A really big hat. Yeah. Like one of those big 10-gallon, those big foam cowboy hats.
Yeah. Because a lot of the subculture fucking fashion was about fucking kind of like standing out.
That's what I mean. And that's what, if you're going to commit crimes, you don't want to stand out.
You want to blend in.
I mean, if you're a serial killer or something, it's like, look at all the fucking serials, like Ted Bundy, look at all this. They don't look like anyone that you would remember necessarily. Yeah. It's like you don't want to stand out because you don't want to get caught. Yeah. Duh. It's like you don't want to walk around with fucking fishnets and corsets and shit on.
Blending in is fucking a type of camouflage.
Yeah.
It's urban camouflage.
It is. Yeah. So you just want to kind of look like everyone else.
Yeah.
So, like I said, this whole thing is fucking dumb. Okay, so they initially bring him in. Like I said, there was a whole bullshit with the polygraph. And then, initially I think they said that, he's not a suspect. We just brought him in because we think he has information about the case. Now, it should be noted that him and the other two guys that eventually got convicted, they didn't know those kids. You know what I mean? They didn't know who they were. Not really. I mean, they might have known them like around because it was a small town or whatever, but they didn't know them. So then later, June 3rd, like a few days after the bodies were found, they bring in another guy who was like an acquaintance of Damien Echols. I don't think he knew him all that well, but he was kind of like, an acquaintance type of thing. Now, this was a guy named Jessie Misskelley. Now, this kid only had, I mean, he had an IQ I've seen between 72 and 85.
Dumb as shit. Then.
So, I mean, he was mentally challenged. All right. Now, I've seen like interviews with him and stuff. He's not like, you know, he can still function, like he can still have a job and stuff, but he seems to have like the mentality of maybe like a 5 to 8 year old
that's dumb.
child. You know what I mean? So, the problem was, even though he was a minor, they bring him in for questioning, and because he was like an associate of Damien Echols, they bring him in without his parents, even though he is mentally challenged. I guess his dad said, okay, you can take him in for questioning, but they didn't know that he was going to be like interrogated about the murder and stuff. Usually if it's a kid or if it's, you know, someone who it has diminished mental capacity,
you better have a fucking attorney.
Yeah, they're supposed to have someone there with them.
Right.
So they questioned him for 12 hours, of which only about an hour and a half of that recording survives.
Yeah. They grilled the shit out of that kid. If you get your hands on a dumb person, you fuck with them for a long time, you can get them to confess.
Well, they did.
Yeah, sure.
They did.
You can get them to confess the shit they didn't do. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, so the recordings that survive of this 12-hour interrogation are very, I mean, to me, and I'm not a professional, I'm not a cop, I'm not anything like that, but to me, it very clearly sounds like they are extremely leading questions.
Okay,
basically,
no, that's not how you do it. You're supposed to ask them where they took the kid, what they do, how they do, you know, how did you tie him up? Did you tie him up? You have to ask them questions.
That is not what happened.
And because if the answers are all wrong, then you know that the person didn't do it because they're just making it up.
I got the distinct impression, and like I said, a lot of this interrogation is gone coincidentally.
That's because they fucking fuck that kid over.
You know, but even the part that survives, I mean, I think it's pretty damning on the cops because, okay, so they would ask something like this, and forgive me if I can't like remember like word for word what he said. This is one thing that stood out to me. So the kids were killed like in the evening, you know what I mean? Because they were last seen around 6:30, 7 p.m. and then they never came home, and then they weren't really found until the next day, and they'd been in the water for a while. So it must have been like sometime after 7 p.m. that they were killed. So they start talking to Jessie Misskelley, and they're like, okay, well, what time was it when you took the kids or when you saw the kids or whatever? He initially said noon. He said noon. And then the cops said, oh, well, you mean it was after school? Yeah, after school. And then, like, as they kept... so it was evening time, or it was nighttime or something like... Yeah, nighttime. So you could tell that the kid was just trying to tell them what they wanted to hear so he could go home.
You're right, yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
He's lying. Yeah, well, it really gave the impression of... you know, what do you want me to tell you?
Right.
So I can leave.
Well, they probably told him that if you tell us this, you can go home.
Yeah, I think that's probably what they told him,
right.
And I think that was probably on the part of the recording that they conveniently lost or that they didn't record.
So he was just going to tell them whatever they wanted to hear, whether he was guilty or not.
Because
that motherfucker wasn't guilty.
Because
if he was guilty, he would have told them what happened.
Because he very clearly said that it was noon. He said that it was noon because he hadn't gone to school that day, he said. Yeah. And like I said, the crime happened in the evening. So they got him to go later and later in the day until finally he was like, the night, blah, blah, blah.
That means he didn't do it.
He also said that the kids were tied up with rope, which they weren't. It was shoelaces. He also said that he saw Damien Echols raping the boys. The boys were not raped. So a lot of the shit that he came up with, you could tell that he was just trying to feeling around to tell them what they wanted to hear because he thought, I mean, like I said, he was not a smart boy. 70
IQ is fucking dumb as shit. That's just fucking dumb.
You know, and he seemed like a lovely person. Yeah, he seemed like a really nice person, but
that's mentally incompetent.
Yeah, basically. He didn't really seem to understand what was going on or, what his rights were, or what they were trying to. He was just trying to like tell them the story that they wanted so he could leave.
No, he should have been, questioning somebody with an IQ that low without the presence of a defense attorney. That's fucking, it should be.
There was nobody. His parents weren't there or nothing.
Right.
And it's like, that is highly, highly, I don't know if it's illegal, but it's really, really unethical.
It should be illegal.
Yeah, I don't know if it's illegal. I don't know about Arkansas,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. There's some fucking fucked up laws in Arkansas, which I'll get into in a little bit too.
Yeah.
But so Jessie Misskelley basically confessed that they had done this. He said that he hadn't killed any of them themselves, but that one of the boys had tried to run away, and he had like corralled the kid back, and he came up with this story. And like I said, there were a lot of inconsistencies in it that were not, not correct, like with the actual details of the crime. Now, the day after he confessed, because he said it was him and Damien Echols and another guy, and that they had done this. Jason Baldwin, I think, is the other one's name. And so the next day, like after he made that confession, he recanted. He said, no, that's not what happened. He's like, they had him in there for 12 hours. He was scared of them. They made threats or veiled threats, or he wasn't really sure what was going on. So he took it back. Now, he also said that they had informed him of his Miranda rights, but that he didn't understand what they were talking about. Like I said, this is, someone with a mentality of like a small child. So he really clearly didn't understand like the gravity of what was going on. So, however, because he played into the narrative that they wanted and they got him to say what they wanted him to say, which, like I said, if you listen to the recordings, it very much does sound like they're trying to lead him into the fucking narrative that they want, especially with the shit with the time of day and all that kind of stuff. So he confessed, and even though he recanted the next day, the cops still arrested Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin, who was the other guy that was involved. Who was Echols and Baldwin were actually really close friends. Now, so they all get arrested. Now, the shitty thing about this was that it seemed like if you watch the first part of the HBO documentary Paradise Lost, because they made like 3 parts, I think, like several years apart. So the first one that they made came out in 1996, which was just 3 years after the crimes. And it seemed like as soon as these 3 boys got arrested, mostly the whole town had decided, well, they got them. That's who did it. I mean, Jessie Misskelley confessed. He said that they did it. So that was kind of the end of it. And you could see, and I'm not going to shit on, the parents of the boys. I understand. It's like, look, their 8-year-old son just got murdered. That's fucked up. They want somebody to blame. But it just seems like they just went off on this fucking, they just wanted to kill these teenage boys before they even went to trial, before any evidence came out or anything like that. Everyone it was like a total witch hunt. They just like jumped on the shit. And like I said, I understand that they were grieving and that this was a horrible thing to happen to them, but it's like, I don't really think that was super helpful. I mean, particularly the stepdad of Christopher Byers, who was briefly a suspect, but that guy did really not come off very well in the first documentary, and he actually complained about it later on, because, I mean, he was seen in the documentary setting up, what were they, like pumpkins or cans or something like that, and saying that these were like the 3 teenagers that got arrested, and he's like, I'm gonna blow them in half, boom, boom, and he was like shooting them and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm like, dude, they haven't even gone to trial yet. That is really not helping. It's like, it's making you look like a lunatic. And he did come out later. I mean, he had a brain tumor. He was an alcoholic. He was on all kind of like medications and stuff. And he was like, they made me look really bad. And, to his credit, even though he looks like a crazy person in the first documentary, he did come out later and say, even though he initially thought that the 3 boys were guilty, he did come out later and say that he didn't think that they had done it. And so he did do a 180, and he did come out and apologize and all that other kind of stuff. So to his credit, even though he looks like a nut in the first one. So 8 months after Jesse's initial confession, Jessie Misskelley, he says that he wants to make another statement to the police. Now, his lawyer tells him not to, but then Jessie comes up with this other story where he again says that they did it, but now he adds like new details, which I'm not entirely sure why they did this. And this is very weird to me, because it did seem like too much emphasis was put on the confession, because even the judge in this case, Barnett, I think his name was, he actually said on camera, I don't think that anyone would falsely confess to a crime. I'm like, are you high? That happens all the time.
Happens all the time, yeah.
Why do you think that they keep details back from the press and all this other kind of stuff just for exactly that reason? Yeah. I'm like, how long have you been a judge?
They got some masochistic fucking lunatics that'll show up and goes, I killed the person.
Right.
Yeah.
They just want attention, or they want something like that.
They're like, what? Yeah.
And like I
yes,
said,
I killed John Benet Ramsey.
Yeah.
And then they can't answer any of the fucking questions about the case.
And I think that, I mean, I don't think that that's why Jessie Misskelley did it. Right. I think that in his case, I'm not really sure he understood, like I said, the gravity of the situation. And I think that he was just desperately trying to tell them the narrative that they wanted to hear, because I think that he thought that if he told them what they wanted to hear, then maybe he wouldn't get in trouble. You know what I mean? So it really did seem to him, because a lot of people have pointed this, this does mean they're guilty, because even 8 months later, when he wasn't under direct police interrogation, he went in again and, reiterated, even though he had recanted like the first confession, he went in later and he's like, yeah, here it is. We did this, that, and the other thing. But like I said, he added details that hadn't been, that he hadn't confessed the first time. It's like a lot of the details were wrong and all this other stuff. So I really do think that he was just trying to make this, he was trying to do the correct narrative so that he wouldn't be in trouble anymore. I really feel like that's kind of what his mindset was. I'm not entirely sure, but that is kind of how it plays out to me. So, yeah. So also there was this woman named, because holy shit, there's so much horrible shit that happened in this shit. So there's this other woman named Vicky Hutchison. Now, she had just moved to West Memphis shortly before the murders. Now, she said that like the day after the murders took place, she got arrested and was undergoing a polygraph for an unrelated charge. They thought she had stolen some money from her job or something like that. Now, while she was in there, like being questioned for that crime, her son Aaron was there. And Aaron, who I think was only 7 or 8 years old, he happened to say to the guy who was administering the polygraph, he's like, oh, the boys got killed at the quote-unquote playhouse, okay? Now, this was before the bodies were found, like shortly before the bodies were found. Now, so when they found the bodies sort of near where this little kid had said that they were killed, so they thought, well, maybe there was, this playhouse or whatever, maybe that had something to do with it. So they asked this little kid, well, it was like, what else do you know about this stuff? And he said that he saw the murders committed or had seen some of it or something, and they were Satanists, of course, and that they had spoken Spanish. Also...
That's the only foreign language he knows.
I guess.
Yeah.
He also said, like, a lot of the details that he gave were just, like, contradictory. Also, they showed him... photos of Damien Echols and, the other, and Jason Baldwin and Jessie Misskelley. He did not recognize them. Also, the place where he said that there was a playhouse, there wasn't one there. So even though there was this whole thing going on, like, that it fueled into the whole satanic rite thing, even though that kid was clearly just pulling shit out of his ass. And this is why you don't ask children to be like your main, you don't hang your entire case on the fucking testimony of a child. We talked about this in some of the Satanic Panic cases with like people that said, well, they flushed the kids down the toilet and then they went into this like fucking underground tunnel and all this, and Chuck Norris was there and all this other kind of...
And the Satanist showed up in a big balloon.
Right.
That's another one, yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, but because these police, for some reason, because this little kid, even though all the shit that he said was bullshit, it was like the only stuff that he said that had, the police pricked up their ears when he said satanic cult, even though nothing else that he said was relevant. They told Vicky Hutchison, his mom, they said, okay, well, we're going to put hidden microphones in your house. And then we want you, because she knew Jessie Misskelley, but not the other two. So she's like, well, we want you to have Damien Echols over at your house because they wanted him to say something incriminating and they would like catch it on the fucking, microphones. So Jessie Misskelley, who, like I said, at this point had like made a couple confessions and gone back on him and whatever, he's like, okay, well, I'll introduce the two of them. So Damien Echols comes over to Vicky Hutchison's house and didn't say anything incriminating, even though the cops later said, oh, well, he probably did say something incriminating, but we couldn't really hear it. It was like garbled or some shit like that. Then, and then this woman later went on, this fucking Hutchison woman, she later went on and she testified at the first trial too, is that 2 weeks after the murder, that her and Damien and Jessie had attended a Wiccan meeting in another part of Arkansas. And she said that Damien had bragged about killing the kids, right? Except later on, many years later, after the boys had already been convicted, she went back on it and said it was all a fucking lie.
Damn.
She said that, she's like, well, I didn't want to get in trouble because, like I said, she was in trouble for embezzlement and shit like that. So she's like, well, I thought that I would get off on that. She's like, also, I wanted the money for the reward.
Ooh.
So I just...
Hey, it's Oklahoma.
So, no, it's Arkansas.
Arkansas.
Same difference.
Same difference.
Whatever.
Well, Mississippi's got to fuck with Arkansas and Oklahoma.
So it's like just for her own... So three very most likely innocent kids went to... And like I said, they were in there for 18 years before they got out. Damien Echols was on death row for 18 years.
Damn.
And they were going to give him like... Yeah. And it's like, actually, I mean, considering that, he seems like pretty fucking chill.
18 years.
I'd be mad, but he's not mad. Well, he got into like, Buddhism and all that kind of stuff.
To keep his mind sound.
Yeah, so he seems to have, I mean, he's still mad about it, obviously, but, and like I said, he still has reason to be, as I'll get into, but he actually seems a lot more chill than I would be about the shit. But yeah, so let's take a break right now, and then when we come back, we'll get into the trials and just what I think probably maybe could have happened and all the shit that they found out later, like all the evidence that came out later that the cops just didn't want to look at and all this other kind of stuff. This is such a depressing case. It really is. I mean, I guess it sort of had a happy ending, except for, the three boys that got murdered. That's not happy, but I mean... Yeah, for the other people. So we're just going to take a break right now, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
What are you talking about? Yeah? What is it? Yeah, oh, I know, I love you too. What is it? What is it? What you doing? Yeah, I know, I love you too. I love you too. What you talking about? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I know, you're such a silly. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I know. Oh, she loves feet. She loves feet.
All right. You love true crime. I love true crime. And I've spent the last 3 years compiling a series of the most intriguing unsolved murders of the 20th century. It's called The Faceless Villain, and Volume 3 is available now. Featuring such fascinating cases as the Ketty murders, the Carrie Babies case, the Frog Boys, the Alcasser murders, and the Inokashira Park dismemberment incident, The Faceless Villain Volume 3 is an involving exploration of unsolved slayings spanning the years from 1980 to 1999. Pick up your copy in print or ebook formats on Amazon, or download the audiobook version from audible.com, and get ready for a chilling journey through modern crime history. Hey everybody, we're back talking about the West Memphis Three case. So, because of Jessie Misskelley's confessions, he was actually put on trial. Now, he was tried separately from the other two, from Jason Baldwin and Damien Echols, just because, according to his confession, he had not directly participated in the murders, but instead had, he just said that when one of the boys tried to run off, like, he corralled him and brought him back, and then, like, the other two boys had done it. So he was only being tried for one count of first-degree murder because they were saying that, if you hadn't gone and brought that kid back, that kid would still be alive, he would have gotten away or whatever. And then the other two were, like, second-degree murder. Now, okay. And the fact that they were both being tried separately was because I guess they have some kind of rule. I think it's called the Bruton rule. I don't know if they have this everywhere. But where his confession couldn't necessarily be used against the other two in their trial. However, it did seem like Jessie Misskelley's trial was almost entirely about getting dirt on the other two. You know what I mean? So it was more like they were trying them in absentia because their trial came like a few weeks later. Because I have to say that other than this poor kid's confession, they didn't really have a lot of physical evidence that any of these three were even there. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, I think the only physical evidence that maybe sort of could have been used to was I think they found like a couple of fibers from like a shirt or something like that one of their moms owned. But the thing about it was that, one, that could be secondary transfer. Two, that fiber that from that particular garment was very common. Because, I mean, this is a fairly small town. They all could have shopped at the same Walmart or whatever and had some of the same things. So that doesn't necessarily imply that the fabric came from that household. You know what I'm saying? So it's like they didn't really have anything physical tying it. So it seemed like they were putting all of their eggs in this confession basket, even though the confession was clearly not as airtight as they would have wanted it to be. So the sad thing is that, and like I said, if you watch Paradise Lost, like the first part, which is kind of like focuses almost entirely on the trials, they show like large chunks of the trial, which was recorded. And it does seem like they tried to, they brought in an expert from UC Berkeley who listened to, what was left of like the tapes of the confession, like the initial confession, the police interrogation, of which, like I said, only about an hour and a half out of 12 hours survived. And this expert was like, look, this is textbook, classic example of police coercion. They're clearly asking leading questions. Like I said, even a novice like me could hear that that's exactly what they were doing. They were leading him into the story that they wanted.
That means in a decent state, all this shit inadmissible in court.
It should have been. Yeah. It should have been. And so, if it was me, if I was sitting on this jury, I really don't think I would have bought. If I had just listened to that, I'd been like, yeah, that poor kid. It's like they just...
If you have to fucking coerce the confession, it's not a true confession anyway.
Right. Because they're
You have to lead them? Then that means that you got the wrong one.
Yeah.
If you got the right one, he leads you. And it all fits the evidence.
And like I said, a lot of the shit that he said was not consistent with the crime scene. Like I said, there was the whole thing about, they were tied up with rope, and they weren't. Yeah. It was shoelaces. And the fact that he said, yeah, I saw Damien, and I even saw like this part of the thing where he said in the confession, he's like, yeah, Damien started screwing him and shit. I think that's what he said. Yeah. When none of the boys were raped. Because initially, I think the cops were operating under the assumption that the boys had been raped because there was anal dilation, but that happens.
Death.
Yeah, that happens when you die.
All your elastic.
Not to be gross about it, but all your muscular shit just goes up. That's and that's why a lot of people like shit themselves when they die and stuff like that, because your sphincter muscle is just vacated so that's what happens. So they didn't find any semen, they didn't find any like bruising or abrasions or anything like that around the anuses. So they most other experts that looked into the case later on were like, yeah, the boys were not raped. So obviously that was a massive inconsistency in the story that, the police still took as gospel, because like I said, it played into what they wanted to play into. So, like I said, even though it seemed like this was the only fucking shit that they had, Jessie Misskelley was actually convicted in February of 1994 of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder, life plus 40 years. He did appeal the conviction to the Arkansas Supreme Court, but the conviction was upheld. 3 weeks after that, they tried Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin together. Now, this was also kind of a joke, because one of the expert witnesses, and if you were listening to this audio podcast, I am making air quotes, was this dude that they brought in named Dale W. Griffiths. Now, this guy was a supposed, and here I am with the air quotes again, occult expert, who Jerry Driver and Steve Jones were big fans of. Like, he had written some books. I think he, like, even wrote some books subsequently about how to identify occult murders and all that other kind of stuff. Okay, well, it turns out that this guy who said that he had a PhD, I'm not sure what the PhD was in, occult studies, perhaps? I don't even know if you can get a PhD in that. You probably can. But it turned out that his PhD was from Columbia Pacific University. Not Columbia University, the real one. Yeah. Columbia Pacific University, unaccredited, mail order.
Okay.
The defense...
That's a bullshit... That's what they call a fucking degree... what do they call it? A degree mill?
Yeah. It's a diploma mill.
Diploma mill.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. Yeah. And this... I mean, to me, this blows my mind. Because I've seen, like, portions of the trial where the defense attorney for the two teenagers says to the guy, what classes did you take to obtain this PhD? And the guy at first tries to dodge the question. It's this older looking dude. He first tries to dodge, well, I've already said that, blah, blah, blah. What classes did you take, says the defense attorney. Well, no classes. He took no classes.
Yeah.
He paid...
Diploma mill.
And got a PhD in occult studies. Yeah. And he even says some stuff like, you know, the OTO, the Ordo Templo, whatever it is?
Orientalis.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. He talked about that, but he said that it stood for something else. So he didn't even know what the fuck he was talking about.
He didn't know fucking...
He didn't even know real occult shit. Right. He was just pulling stuff out of his ass.
He didn't know fucking Crowley's fucking school.
Right. Yeah. So this is the guy that they're touting.
If you want to call Crowley's school the school, it wasn't...
Well, you know, it's a school in the sense
Crowley was pulling out of his ass too, most shit.
Well, see, that's the nice thing about all that kind of occult stuff. You can just pull stuff out of your ass and just make a whole fucking industry out of that shit. Yeah. I respect the group.
Crowley was the prototype. Crowley was the prototype for fucking Scientology too. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Hubbard was
Hubbard was big into that, and you know, because Crowley realized that people would pay money to become a wizard. Yeah. And you could move them through fucking levels of study and keep them going forever and make money off of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the bridge is in Scientology. You just keep
you're making people pay you for magic powers.
I'm a OT8, you know, or whatever.
And if they get enough into it and they pay enough into it, they will legit think that they have magic powers.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Tom Cruise. He thinks he has magic powers because you keep telling them that. You tell them that. And it is, and like I said, since they've already sunk thousands and thousands of dollars in it, they don't want to go back on it and go, man, what a retard I was. They're just like, yeah, I fucking super have magic powers. See how
although, you know, okay, if you look at Scientology, I'm going off on a fucking tangent.
Here he goes on the tangent. Woo, there he goes.
If you look at Scientology, each thing that Scientology, when you go through those OT levels, there's not much there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really does. It's all fucking normal human abilities and just fucking kind of a lot of it playing mind games.
Yeah.
You know? It doesn't really get bullshitty until you start telling people that you can transcend space and time and prevent accidents. And the reason why you haven't been in a car accident is because the car accident happened, but you fucking went backwards in time to prevent it.
See, and that's genius because there's no way to disprove that.
All right. They're like, oh, if you hadn't been a fucking OT fucking 7 or 8 or 9...
You would have been dead right now.
You'd have been dead right now because all those times you were driving a car, you actually had car accidents. But you fucking stopped time and went back and fucking prevented it.
Like I said, it's genius.
So there's no way to fucking really... Tom Cruise does have abilities. The bitch can fucking fly aircraft. He's pretty good with a gun. He can ride motorcycles.
Like I said, he has actual abilities.
That's because he fucking did that shit on his own. Right.
Yeah, he learned how to do it like a normal person.
Millions
of people learn to do that stuff. You don't have to be a Scientologist.
If little Tom's out there listening to me, I respect Tom. Fucking he's a good actor.
We pick on Tom.
I pick on Tom. He's a good actor, but he does have real skills. Okay.
I'm not saying that.
He should be proud of his skills. He actually can do that shit. Did Scientology give that to him? No, I don't
No.
think so.
Well, like I said, because there's
no.
millions of people that can do that
That can
stuff
do that shit.
that weren't Scientologists. They just did it because they wanted to, and they learned how to do it.
I think Scientology gave Tom the confidence to go do that.
Yeah.
I think. I think he wanted to be part of something, and
he doesn't get the shit Scientology.
No, he got
like
good
just
Scientology.
your regular people get
Yeah,
it.
no, he was.
You don't get
boy.
shit on like within the fucking slave
Yeah.
camps and everything like that.
Yeah, he was a poster boy. They gave him the best Scientology could offer.
Yeah, so for
And-
him it worked
right.
out, which I can get that because he's super privileged. He had
Right.
money, and they kind of
And when you look at Scientology, what they're talking about is it's a fucking self-esteem course.
yeah.
That's a lot of it, I think.
But like I said, anyone can learn to. I mean, if I really wanted to learn to fly a plane, I could learn to fly
You
a
can
plane.
learn to fly a plane, right?
I mean, you know what I mean? And this is something that, and I think I mentioned this to somebody like in the YouTube comments, when I think when we were talking about hoarders, because I was talking about my grandfather. And my grandfather, one of the things, even though he was a hoarder and stuff like that, he was also a genius. And one of the things that he instilled in me and also in my mom and all of her sisters and stuff like that was, if someone else learned to do it, you can too.
Yeah.
That was what he always said.
If you have a decent IQ, there are some
Yeah.
people that know.
Well, yeah, that's not true
Yeah,
for everybody,
it's not
but,
true for everybody.
I mean, if you are a reasonably intelligent person
Yeah.
with reasonably
At
intelligent...
least, if you're at least average IQ, or maybe a little bit
Yeah.
better will help you.
If you want to do
can
it bad
pretty much
enough,
do anything.
you can learn to
Yeah.
do it. Like, other people have learned to do it, then so can you.
You want to have about 110 IQ. All right, if you have 110 IQ, you're good to go. If you have 145 IQ, it's even fucking better. If you start getting past 145 IQ, it's actually a hindrance.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, it gets to a point to where there's diminishing returns, and all of a sudden, high intelligence starts working against you. You start overthinking things, you suffer too much, and you start to malfunction. This was actually fucking proven. The U.S. Army proved it in World War II. Battlefield commanders, when the IQs went above 145, they started to fail. They started to actually have fucking defeats in combat instead of victories. It's because they overthought the enemy.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a problem.
Yeah. Because it starts to fucking verge on, what do they call it? Asperger's. It starts to
I'm not judging because...
it starts to start going to where you start talking about autism. You know what I mean? Super high intellect is good to solve certain problems, but it's not a generalized intelligence a lot of times. That's the difference.
Yeah, it depends on the thing. It's like, that's the thing. It's kind of complicated when you're talking about intelligence because there isn't really one kind of intelligence. There's a lot of different kinds.
Right.
The kind that they test is generally, I mean, at least when I took an IQ test, like a child psychologist gave me an IQ test, many, many years ago. That is mostly a test of logic and problem-solving skills.
Yeah, and that's technical.
Yeah, and in which case, when I was tested for that, my IQ was 152.
Yeah.
However, other things I have problems with.
Yeah. Jenny will attest. My IQ tested out at 145. All right. That was when I was young. It's probably declined some. All right. But really, my skills are what's called human engineering skills. I know how to deal with people. Jenny will tell you, if I see you and talk to you, I can size you up. I can find out everything about you, and I can make you friend or foe, or I can manipulate you, or I know when you're a threat. Jenny will tell you.
Yeah.
I know bad when I see it. What's a good way to put this? For me, I focus on what's called, human engineering.
Yeah.
Relationships with other people. And systems. And the powers of Nostradamus and Nostradamus' ability to foresee the future is to understand human nature and understand how groups work and how groups interact with each other. So my ability to see the future has to do with being able to fucking know how one group will interact with another and how that fucking will affect the world. That's how I fucking foresaw the apocalypse.
I tend to be better at technical things.
Yeah, she is. And she's real good at creative stuff, little technical stuff, problem solving. specific problems. There's a lot of different kinds of intelligence. There's also people that are fucking just geniuses of fucking physicality, which I respect.
Like I said, that's a totally different and
Yeah.
totally legitimate kind of intelligence. And I feel like that's one they don't test.
You're right.
Like, I was good at the one that they do test.
You're right.
But that doesn't mean that that's the only kind.
No, there are people that are just fucking physically just fucking geniuses. Athletes of different types. People that can fucking just render another person helpless physically. People who can just overcome things physically. And, there's no test for that other than just sports or seeing it happen.
And see, that is one thing that I'm not very good. Like, it's weird because I used to be really good at that kind of thing. Like, I used to be really coordinated. I used to do ballet. I used to do gymnastics. I did all this. And then, like, after my teenage years, for some reason, that ability kind of went away, and I got, like, really klutzy and clumsy, and I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it was because I had a lot of problems with my
I think
inner...
it's confidence.
It might be that, or it might be I had a lot of problems with my inner ears, so it might be some kind of balance issue because I can't, like... I try to hold things and drop them and run into walls and shit like that.
I'm big into... I respect all different kinds of intelligence and IQ, but I'm big into human engineering and physicality. I love that. I respect athletes and people that are physically endowed in certain ways and genetics. And then I'm fucking big into fucking just the way people are and the way they act and the way they think. I'm more into that. I'm not into this little technical stuff. You know what I mean? It's just not me. Yeah. Other people are into that.
Yeah.
I'm into the application. You know what I mean? How do you take knowledge, apply it onto the fucking earth to make a world that you want? And that's really what human engineering is all about.
Yeah.
The guys that are running the show are doing what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They know how to fucking make the world bend to them. Because they understand the systems. And they understand people.
Yeah.
Some people would call it, oh, that's manipulation. No, that's fucking life.
Well, everything is manipulation.
Everything is manipulation, and that's the way it is.
Manipulation of some types has a bad rap, as, understandably so, and as it should. But, I mean, pretty much your whole entire life, you're trying to get people to do what you want.
So you can move ahead in some way, or so you can have the security.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a human thing. You know what I mean?
It's politics. It's politics.
Yeah, that's just how it is.
Right. You can see it happening today.
But yeah, so we were talking about Dale Griffiths, the supposed occult expert. Yeah, so like all the shit that he came up with on the stand, just completely. And even though, like from my point of view, just saying I didn't sit through the entire trial, obviously, because, I wasn't there. But just the portions of it that I saw, it seemed like the defense attorney was doing pretty good at making this guy look like a knob and just saying, it's like, look, you just bought this fucking degree, you don't know shit about shit. But here you are being a fucking occult expert, because I guess everyone can do that now. But it didn't really seem to matter, like, to the juries, because I figured the people on the jury, they were from around there. I feel like a lot of people had already made up their minds. You know what I mean? That these kids, they look weird. They listen to Metallica. They fucking, like I said, they write bad goth poetry like we all did back in the day. And so because they are different than us, then they are outsiders, and therefore they must have done this, because they didn't want to think that it was one of them or like just one of a normal person, even though I suspect that it probably was. They always want to like have it be the other, you know what I mean? So they can make that person into a monster. So another point of contention was that the prosecution argued that Damien Echols knew stuff about the case that had not been released to the public, and I'm doing air quotes again. This was the fact that one of the victims, Christopher Byers, had been more mutilated than the others. He was talking about the genital mutilation. Now, it is true that wasn't officially released to the public. However, allegedly, it had gotten out through the rumor mill, because apparently maybe Christopher Byers' stepfather or mother or something like that had been talking to the police in the case, and they knew the details of the case, and so it had kind of like spread through the community. Like I said, it's a small town. So I feel like he could have heard that elsewhere. Like I said, there was a lot of shit about police interrogations, not just of Jessie Misskelley, but of all three of the suspects, that were suspiciously not recorded by the police. So it was became a case of these 3 teenage boys, and it was like a he said, she said, because they would come out in court and be like, hey, the cop said this, that, and the other, and then the cop would come on the stand and be like, that's not what I said, but it wasn't recorded, so no one could check. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like the cops, you know, it's like, I hate to say, but in this situation, I really do feel like they had decided that these kids were guilty before any of this shit even happened, and they were just going to make that happen no matter what.
Because of their prejudices, and
Yeah.
they believed that these kids were guilty from
They
day
did.
one. They didn't think one
And
of their
most of
own
the
could have
town
done
did
it.
as well. I mean, like I said, if you
Because
see...
they're not going to suspect one of their own. They're going to
Of course
suspect
not.
some kind of a
like I
fucking
said,
outsider.
it's easier. It's easier to say it's that weird person.
Yeah, it's very similar to the witch trials in a
Yeah.
certain way. You pick a motherfucker that stands out and goes, oh, it has to be him.
Well, yeah.
Because he's
And
not
that-
like us.
And that happened in the witch trials, too. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that old lady, oh, she has a
Yeah.
disease, or she's weird,
Right,
or
right,
something
yeah.
like that.
But
It's very easy to other
Right.
someone.
That's not the way fucking criminality works.
No, not at all.
It's usually a person who is just like you, but or at least
Because
on
that's
the
how you get away with
or
it.
on the surface. Yeah,
That's
they're
how you
just
get
like
away
you.
with it.
Yeah.
I'm always way more suspicious of normal people than
Yeah.
I am of, like, weird-looking people.
Somebody who's camouflaged.
Yeah, exactly. So it ended up, even though the trial was kind of a circus and kind of bullshit, in my opinion, both Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin were convicted of 3 counts of murder. Jason Baldwin was given life in prison, and Damien Echols was put on death row. So he was on death row. Now, I mean, honestly, not too long after, because I think really the impetus for looking at the case anew and like maybe suspecting that these kids might be innocent didn't really come until a few years after the murders. It was 1996, and HBO had produced this documentary, like the first part of a documentary called Paradise Lost, and it kind of went into the case and stuff. And I think that once that kind of gained popular, because a lot of people saw that, and it was like a really big deal. And once people saw that documentary, there was just kind of this steamrolling kind of thing where everybody saw this and started to see it as a horrible injustice. And even in 1996, when the first part of it came out, they didn't really have evidence that came out later that maybe was pointing to another suspect. But I do think that even in 1996, it appeared that even if the boys had been guilty, like from that, from the perspective of that time period, that they had clearly not gotten a fair trial because the police had already decided that they were guilty and were, trying to like push it in that direction. So even after 1996, a lot of celebrities started to get involved. And normally everyone's kind of like rolls their eyes and like, oh God, celebrities are getting involved. But in this case, I think it was a good thing because not only did they put money, they put their name, their fame behind it. And it kind of like brought a lot of more attention to it and ended up getting a lot more attention brought to the case that probably wouldn't have otherwise. So you got people like, it's like Johnny Depp got involved, Henry Rollins got involved, Natalie Maines from the Dixie Chicks, she got involved, Peter Jackson, the director of Lord of the Rings, he got involved. So it's like a lot of these people saw this documentary and thought this is, it's horrible that these 3 little boys were killed, but we don't think that these 3 teenagers did it, which means not only that you fucked over these 3 teenagers, but also that the real killer is still running around. So they started like giving money to the defense and like speaking out, doing benefit concerts and stuff like that. Now, as the years went on and these poor, teenagers were like fucking rotting in jail, and people started looking more into the case, there was a really good book about it called The Devil's Knot, where, the author kind of like went into the details behind the case, that there was some really like messed up shit behind this case that didn't come out until later on. One, the crime scene was drastically compromised. Like, as I said before, people were just like trampling all over it. They didn't really secure it in a timely fashion. The bodies were taken out of the water before the coroner arrived. The coroner did not arrive until 2 hours after the bodies had been found. And they were just like letting the bodies like lay there on the bank, and they were like decaying, like maggots were eating them and stuff like that, which is not really a protocol. They also didn't drain the creek, which is normally what you would do in that situation. So you could like gather more evidence and stuff like that. Also the guy that did the autopsies, his expertise was also called into question, like I said, because he initially, I don't know if he came out and said that the boys had been raped. Like I said, later on they determined that they had not. But he also never tested the blood that was found at the scene, which wasn't a lot because, like I said, they don't think that the boys were necessarily killed at that location. They might have been brought there from somewhere else. But even the little bit of blood that they found there was never tested. They also didn't, it just seems like the coroner, he said that the genitals of, I believe it was Christopher Byers, were cut off with a knife, and that there were scratch wounds and stuff. And like I said, if you watch the documentaries, they'll show you the pictures and stuff like that, and it's kind of upsetting. So just letting you know ahead of time. But there were these weird scratches on there, which he said had been done with a hunting knife. Now there was another weird thing too, where there was a hunting knife found in a lake behind one of the suspects' houses. And at the trial, they made a huge deal about this, as though this was the murder weapon. However, as they later discovered, when other experts, other coroners and stuff like that looked into this case, they were like, the wounds that you're seeing on these bodies, that was not a knife. And it came out later that allegedly that knife had actually been thrown into that lake before the murders even happened.
It's an old ass knife.
Yeah, so it's and there was nothing tying any of the suspects to the knife. They didn't know if it belonged to any of them. And one journalist that I was listening to who covered the case who lived there, and he covered the case from the thing, he's like, the cops had called us before they even found this knife and called us and said, hey, we're going to find something today. You guys need to come out there and cover it. So it's almost like they knew that it was in there. And like I said, it was never determined that it was the murder weapon, but they almost kind of made it at the trial seem like it was the murder weapon without coming out and saying that it was the murder weapon. But it didn't have anything to do with the case. Like I said, it was just some old knife that they found, and that they couldn't tie to any of the suspects. They couldn't tie to any of the victims or nothing. And as I said later, they found out that the scratches and stuff, because what they tried to imply at the trial was that one of these three teenagers had taken this hunting knife, the kind of serrated knife, and had scraped it down because they weren't stabbed, like I said, and had scraped it down their down their skin. And later experts that looked into it said, look, that looks like animal predation. That's like turtle claws. And they said that might be the same as, and I think they consulted 6 different, pathologists later on and showed them photos, and some of them I think got to examine the actual bodies. And they said, the one whose genitals were mutilated, they said that looks like a turtle.
That's what I said. That's what I said.
Yeah, that's why I was like, yeah, that was a good that you.
Having a fucking country background and understand about Mississippi, if it's in the fucking water, the turtles go right after it. It's fucking snapping turtles.
And in the newer documentary, West of Memphis, they actually went to a turtle expert who lived in the area, and he's like, look, the creek where these boys' bodies were found, it was like Turtle Central. They even called it Turtle Creek or Turtle something. And these turtles have that really sharp beak. They're big. Right. And he's like, and he put a pig carcass into the water. He's like, they will go after little fleshy bits like ears, testicles, penises, anything that's dangling there in the water.
Hell yeah. Their mouths are like little snips.
Yep.
They're just like little aluminum snips. They'll take little pieces out, and they're everywhere, and they're friendly little creatures. Just don't fucking put your hand in front of them. They'll fucking bite you.
They're just like, finger.
Yep.
Delicious.
Yep.
But yeah, so it does seem like the coroner in the initial investigation, so all the shit about the genital mutilation and that means it's a satanic cult and stuff ended up probably being bullshit, because they said, all of the other experts they consulted later on, that some of the celebrities that got involved in the case, they actually put their own money into hiring these other people, and were like, I don't know why anyone would think that had been done by a person and had been done before the kids were dead, because that is clearly post-mortem, and that appears to be animal predation.
Oh yeah.
And that would have happened in that, because like I said, even in the documentary, because I was looking, I'm looking at the photo and the video and stuff like that of them actual bringing the bodies out of the creek, and it's the bodies, it's horrific because they're dead and they're naked and everything like that, but they didn't look like they had been cut up or stabbed or ritualistically
It's
mutilated
funny
or
because-
anything like that.
It's funny because you would think that these motherfuckers up here, that they would know better. Because
I think they did know better.
any country boy knows.
I think they did know
If it's
better.
in the fucking water, it's food.
Yep.
Everything's eaten on that. Fish, turtles, you know. So I ain't buying that. They knew.
I think they knew too.
They would have to know.
Like I said,
Because
I think they had
it's
already
second nature.
decided.
Yeah, they don't, because it's second nature for a southerner who's fucking rural to understand that if it's in the fucking water, the turtles are eating it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're fucking everywhere.
And like I said, they even knew they were everywhere
Yeah.
in this fucking creek.
Yeah.
And the kids were in there for like 24 hours, maybe not 24 hours, but like at least 12 hours in the water.
They know when something's dead. If it's not moving, it's dead. They're going to get a bite off that.
Yeah.
And they're going to go for the fucking softest bits that are sticking out first.
Yep. That's exactly what happens.
Yep.
And like I said, every single expert, like independent expert that they hired later on was like, I don't see how anyone could have thought that a person
Had
did
done
that.
Right.
Like cut it off with a knife, because that is clearly like a turtle.
They're just trying to pin it on somebody.
Yeah. And so, like I said, there honestly, at that point, I think there was like no excuse, because I think they did know. So, I mean, it would be different if they had pulled the kids out of the water and there had been like fucking pentagrams like carved into their chest or something like that. But it's like the injuries that they had were not consistent with what they were trying to make it seem like.
You know what's funny? I don't know the main suspect because you haven't mentioned him yet. I don't know this much about the case. At this point, I would say that fucking just tying some kids up, not doing anything to them, and throwing them in the water, that almost sounds like something a fucking child would do. Is the fucking suspect young?
No.
No? Okay.
Nope.
Why the fuck would somebody do this?
Yeah.
Where's the motive?
That's what's weird about it. It's
Yeah.
like, even though I have my suspicions about who did it, it's like I'm not sure entirely. Well, I
You
don't
would
know.
think if there were a sexual motive, there'd be signs of fucking sexual assault.
Yeah, the weird thing about it is they brought in John Douglas, the FBI
Yeah.
profiler, very famous. You know,
Yeah.
he was one of the ones that started the FBI profiling whole division, and they brought him in. And when he was first looking at the scene, he's like, I mean, even initially, this guy said, "This does not look like a crime committed by 3 dumb teenagers. This looks like one person, and this looks like a lust murder." Now, after they came, they had more forensic evidence and stuff like that, he's like, maybe not lust murder, but he's like a personal murder. This is somebody that knew at least one, he's like, that knew at least one of these boys, and maybe the other 2 were just collateral damage. That's what he said. And I'm kind of thinking that that's probably what this issue is. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. So there was another thing too, that there was something, okay, one thing that went around was that one of the boys had urine in their stomachs, which again was like another thing that went around trying to, they made him drink pee or something like that, which one that was also bullshit, like whoever, that was just like a rumor. And also that, they consulted a doctor, and a doctor's like, what is that? That is not even, that wouldn't even happen. Like, because even if you drank urine, it would just like soak back into your fucking, they wouldn't find urine in your stomach. You know what I'm saying? He's like, that wouldn't happen after that time period. There was also like some shit going around where Damien had like human testicles like in his house or stuff like that, which was also bullshit. But so, like I said, it just seemed like this whole witch hunt atmosphere. Now, another thing that went around was that some of the bodies had bite marks on them. Now, whether these were actually human bite marks or not has never been definitively determined. However, most experts have said even if they are human bite marks, which they doubt, none of the bite marks match any of the 3 suspects, because the 3 suspects did indeed have their teeth. They did all that comparison and stuff. So like, we're not even sure those are human bite marks on the bodies. They might be just marks or like animal marks or whatever. But even if they are human bite marks, they are not from any of those 3. So May of 1994, all 3 defendants, appealed the convictions, but convictions were all upheld. Now, something that came out, I believe this was in 2007. Okay, so because, when this trial first took place in the early 90s, I guess they had DNA, but it wasn't real, up to the minute or anything like that. So in 2007, they decided to retest some of the evidence. Now, they found a hair that was intertwined in the shoelace that had been used to tie one of the boys up, which is suspicious. This hair was genetically very similar to the stepfather of one of the boys, Terry Hobbs. Interestingly, Terry Hobbs was also, according to at least one, possibly two witnesses, the last person to see the kids. Like, a couple neighbors had seen the boys, like two of them on the bikes and one of them on the skateboard, had seen Terry Hobbs walking toward them and like calling them, hey, it's time to come home, blah, blah, blah. He was the stepfather of Stevie Branch, actually. So he was kind of the, like, according to several witnesses, he was the last person to be seen like walking toward them or near them or whatever. One of his hairs was found in the knot of one of the shoelaces that had been used to tie the boys up. Now, could this be secondary transfer because he was, lived in the house with one of them? Sure. However, they found another bit of physical evidence, either hair or some DNA or something like that, at the scene, like not tied up in the knots or anything like that. Now, this evidence was a genetic match to another guy named David Jacoby. David Jacoby was not only a friend of Terry Hobbs, he was also Terry Hobbs' alibi for the time of the murder. Now, I'm not coming out and saying that Terry Hobbs was the killer, but the only physical evidence that they found at the scene kind of points to him. And the fact that he had an alibi that, him and David Jacoby were out looking for the boys at the time when they were supposedly murdered, and both of their evidence, like physical evidence that it's genetically similar to both of them, was found at the crime scene. That seems a little fishy to me. I'm just saying. Now, Natalie Maines of the Dixie Chicks, she actually came out and said that she thought that motherfucker did it, and he tried to sue her, and he lost. For saying that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
because she has a First Amendment right to say what she wants.
Right. Yeah. So there was some other shit too, but they didn't. The thing about it is that they interviewed like a couple of the other parents, because like I said, 50% of the time, at least 50% of the time, when a kid dies, the parent has something to do with it. 50%. That's what I've heard. So the fact that they didn't interview this guy, I believe they interviewed a couple of the other, like John Mark Byers, Christopher Byers' stepfather. I believe they interviewed him at the time. And like I said, he was the one that kind of came off a little bit like a crazy person, like in the first Paradise Lost documentary from 1986, but has later said that, he's sorry that he was portrayed that way. And he actually came out later and said that he thought that the West Memphis Three were innocent. But the cops didn't interview Terry Hobbs until many years later. Now, it seems like you would interview the parents first because that's usually, statistically, that's something you should be doing. If you knew what you were doing. Because like I said, most of the time when you get killed, it's somebody you know, right?
Yeah. Somebody
in your family. So the fact that they didn't interview him, even though, according to, allegedly, he had been abusive to Stevie Branch. He had, he was not he was his stepdad, not his real dad. So there had been a history there. So it could have been, I'm not saying, like I said, I don't know if he did it. He might have nothing to do with it. I don't know. I'm just saying it looks kind of suspicious that his fucking physical evidence was there and his friends, and also alibis, physical evidence was also found at the scene. That seems a little strange. And it also seems strange that a witness saw him walking toward them not long before they disappeared. I don't know if he did kill them. I don't think he intended to kill them. I just think he was maybe going after them and they got into an argument or something like that. And then maybe he did it accidentally and then he thought, well, maybe I just need to get rid of these other two just because they're fucking witnesses or whatever. I'm not sure entirely what happened. Cops are not entirely sure what happened because, like I said, they're not even really sure if the kids were killed there or if they were killed somewhere else and then taken to that spot. Because, like I said, there was hardly any blood at the scene or no indication that anything had taken place there. So because there was not that much physical evidence, they're not even really sure where the murder took place. But there's some other kind of fishy shit about Terry Hobbs too. Like some people have said not only was he seen like walking toward them, but there was another witness who lived in the house that also said that he was doing laundry at like a weird time, which seemed strange. Like they noticed it because they said he never did laundry ever. So it seemed weird for him to be like washing clothes and sheets and stuff like that at like some weird time of the morning or whatever. So there is some evidence to suggest that perhaps one of the kids' stepfathers was responsible. However, like I said, it's allegedly, and no charges have been brought against him. I did see that the cops finally interviewed him later on, and he, denies having anything to do with the crime, but he seems a little evasive. I mean, in my opinion, he seems a little evasive. I don't know. A lot of people do think that probably he's the guy they should be looking at. But I'm not going to go there and say that I think he did it or anything like that, because he might not have. Now, so these three teenagers who, are now grown men, obviously, they were in prison for 18 years. Like I said, they did several appeals, all of which failed. Now, the shitty thing was that the appeal was overseen by the same judge that had convicted them in the first place. Now, this judge was the same guy who said that he didn't think anyone would falsely confess to anything, which obviously that's bullshit because people do it all the time. He also seemed like when they came forward in 2007 and was like, look, we have this new DNA evidence that points to someone else, like we did the hair analysis and everything. He almost seemed like he just didn't want to fucking deal with it. He was just like, whatever, I've like dealt with this case for however many years it was. It's like, they're guilty, blah, blah, blah. So it seemed like I think he kind of had a change of heart later on, but when he was like looking into appealing, he's like, he wouldn't give them a new trial, even though all this new evidence had come out, because he's just seemed like he was over it, kind of.
Yeah.
So he actually left being a judge because he got like elected to the fucking Senate or Congress or whatever the hell they get elected to. So they replaced him with someone else. Now, the judge that came in later on was more open to, okay, let's see what we can do, like to maybe reopen the case or whatever. So they were going to reopen the case, even though, they had all this new evidence that seemed really strong, but they were still kind of afraid that, they might get convicted again, and then there really wouldn't be anything they could do about it. And I mean, at this point, Damien Echols had been on death row, and like, he was going to fucking die. They were just going to fucking kill him. So they kind of like all behind the scenes, they all kind of came to like, lawyers and judges and whatever. They kind of came to a thing. They're like, okay, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we see if we can get what they call an Alford plea? Now, I'm not really sure if you guys know what this is. It's kind of this really weird thing, and I'm not even really sure. I need to fucking research why this is even a thing. An Alford plea is essentially when you're coming out saying, okay, I didn't do this crime. However, I'm going to plead guilty because I think that if I went to trial, I would be convicted of it. So you plead guilty even though you say you're innocent, but they'll let you go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like this really weird, like legal, they don't really do it that often. But in this case, so they approached the three of them and they said, okay, well, we have this thing where, do you want to do an Alford plea? If you do an Alford plea, but all three of you have to do it, then you will be out by the end of the week. And like I said, they'd been in there for 18 years at this point.
That's a weird ass. How the hell? Yeah,
it's very, very rare.
We did it, but let us go.
Yeah.
What kind of weird shit
is
that? Well,
basically what it is, it's. I feel like, particularly in this case, it was an ass covering. Because I think at this point, the Arkansas police, like everyone involved in this case, knew they fucked up, but they didn't want to admit it. So it's like, well, this will give us a chance to say that the case is closed, but they'll still be let out because probably they didn't do it. It was almost kind of like it's like face saving. Like they can still get out, but they're still technically guilty, and the case is technically closed because they're still guilty, but they still get to go free. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like I said, this is a very unusual move. So the lawyers were like, well, maybe we can do this, because by this time, all of these documentaries had come out, all these celebrities had come out and raised all this money and got their own, experts. They had all this evidence that they brought in all these new experts. Peter Jackson, he fucking paid for like 6 different like forensic tests, and like he paid like thousands and thousands of dollars. But he made the documentary West of Memphis because he felt really strongly that these kids were innocent and they really needed to be let out. So they had all these people pulling for them. So finally, they were like, okay, so all 3 of you, if you come into court, and this is what you have to say. You have to say, like, look, I didn't do this shit, but I'm pleading guilty because I am saying that if you did bring me to trial again, then you have enough evidence to convict me. So I'm pleading guilty, even though I didn't do it. So that's what they said. Now, there's no guarantee that the judge is going to go, okay. You know what I mean? It's like, no. But if they say no, it's like you just go back to jail. You know what I mean? Now, initially, Damien was like, yeah, man, I'll just say whatever the fuck you want. Just let me the fuck out of here. Because at this point, like, his health had really started to deteriorate. His eyesight is fucked up because, he was on death row. So it's like they say, legally you get 1 hour and stuff. He's like, yeah, they lead you down from your cell into a slightly bigger room and let you walk around. He's like, I didn't get to go outside or nothing like that. So he was just like staring at a wall for 24 hours a day. So his eyesight deteriorated. He still has to wear sunglasses now because he can't see anymore, really. It's like just, or bright lights or anything. So Damien says, fine, I'll sign anything. Jessie Misskelley is like, yeah, just fine, just let me out. I'll do it. Now, Jason Baldwin, he didn't want to do it because he said, look, I would rather sit in here than say that I'm guilty because I didn't do this shit. And I don't want everybody thinking I'm guilty. So he was like sticking to his guns, man. Like he was just like, I would rather sit in here until I'm dead than say that I did this and I didn't do it. Which,
I respect it.
I respect that. Yeah. I really do. And that is another thing that kind of makes me think that they didn't do it, because he was willing to die in prison rather than say that he fucking did it. You know what I'm saying? So he wasn't going to go along with it, but that was only for like a few days or something, because then like the lawyer talked to me, was like, look, dude, it's like, if you don't do this, he's like, I know it sucks. I know it's against your principle. Yeah. Well, it wasn't even him. He's like, I know you don't care about you, but Damien is going to die. He is going, he's going to get the fucking death penalty if you don't do this, please do it. So they finally talked him into it. And in 2011, they let them out. And I was watching an interview with Damien Echols, and he said, we didn't even really know that we were going to be let out until like the night before they let us out. Damn. He's like, so it was like the freakiest, most surreal, because he's like, we go in this room and he's like, we're still all shackled together and stuff. And he's like, they gave us this paper to read. And I was just like, I didn't know. He's like, I hadn't slept for like a week because I was so worried about it, because like I said, there's no guarantee that the judge would be like, okay, you can do that. That's just a plea that you put in. They don't have to accept it. So he's like, so I didn't know it was going to happen. And I was like worried about it. He's like, oh shit, what if they say no? And I have to come back in here and all this other kind of crap. So they go in there and he's like, they said, okay, well, you're free to go. And he's like, then they just unlocked them. And he's like, I didn't know what the fuck. He's like, it was the weirdest thing ever. And it's like, they had this big party for them. Cause he had married, since then. He had a wife named Lori. She's a landscape architect, and she had been pulling for him like the whole entire time. I mean, she visited him like every fucking time they could visit. She was the one that like coordinated like all the, all the celebrities and everything like that. She talked to Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh and all them and got like all the money and raised all the money for their defense and all this other kind of stuff. So she was there. So they got married like in a Buddhist ceremony and everything. And she was waiting for him when he got out. And the funny thing was that, so he gets out and they moved to New York City, which is very funny. I was watching, there was an interview. It was from 2018, I think. And it was the New York Public Library had put it on. And because Damien Echols wrote a book while he was in prison called Life After Death. And it was like about his experience like in prison and about what had happened and everything. And so he was talking about that, and he was talking with Henry Rollins, who, like I said, got into the case like early on. And kind of was like a big supporter and did benefit concerts for them and stuff to get them let out. And he's like, I grew up in Arkansas and I'd never been anywhere else. And he's like, I thought I never thought that I would like New York City, but he's like, I went there and he's just like, I thought it was amazing. He's like, I just thought it was the best place ever. So he lived there. Him and his wife lived there for a while. I think since then they've actually settled in Salem, Massachusetts, which he thought was very funny because of the whole like witch trial thing and like what had happened with him.
Yeah,
and
Salem of today is an Italian neighborhood.
With him and the two other guys. But but he's just like, he just thought it was funny because of like the history and everything. And he's like, that's kind of how I was treated, so I can kind of relate. So him and his wife, I believe they live in Salem now. And they actually did have, like I said, a lot of help, a lot of celebrities that got involved and like, helped them out when he got out of jail, because he'd been in jail since he was a teenager. So he didn't know how to drive. He didn't know anything about anything. The world had changed so much since then. And he's like, and the shitty thing is technically one of the stipulations of the Alford plea. And like I said, this is why this is like a state ass covering thing that Arkansas did, was that you can't sue them for wrongful conviction.
Damn.
That was another thing. No reparations, no nothing. And they are still considered guilty. So that's still on his record.
Damn.
So if anybody does like a background check, it's like guilty of a triple homicide of 8-year-old boys, even though, like I said, 98% sure he didn't do that shit. So that's on their record still. So at this point, he's like, look, I'm kind of like sick of, having to do this and like having to talk about it, because like, but until we get exonerated and like said that we're not guilty, we're still kind of going to be fucked.
I hear cases like this, man, fucking makes you mad.
Well, it makes a lot of people mad.
Makes you wonder, man, is just street justice better than this fucking court justices that these motherfuckers hand out in these little podunk towns?
Yeah, that's
fucking, I think I'd rather have street justice.
Like I said, I think that I think that this is something that a lot of people, like why this case particularly resonated with a lot of people, was because this is a very backward small town.
And they didn't have anything on these guys. There's no fucking forensic, there's no clear connection between these dudes and these bodies.
Yeah, the forensic evidence they found, they found nothing that linked back to those three.
It was just suspicion.
It was different, yeah.
Just suspicion.
And like I said, it seemed like even from the beginning, and I mean, Damien himself has said this, and like I said, he's very well-spoken. He's very, he's a lot more chill about it than I would be. Like I said, that must be some Buddhist shit, because I would be like really, really super mad.
Go down there, I'd be blowing their shit up.
Right, that's what I mean. Well, I mean, he's basically came on, and he loved New York City. He's like, he lives in Salem, Massachusetts now, as far as I know. But he said, I really don't want to ever go back to Arkansas. And it's like, man, I don't fucking blame you, because look what the fuck they did to him. And he's like, it was the whole... He's like, it just seemed like the whole thing was, they were just like railroaded from the beginning. Were they all like, troubled kids? Sure. Like some of them had been in trouble for other things. Nothing major, not murder, not anything like that. Some really breaking
None of that matters. You have to
shit.
have fucking physical evidence.
Exactly.
Or some kind of fucking witness testimony. There wasn't even that.
And even the witness testimony that they had, I mean, the shitty thing was that, and you can see this on some of the documentaries, like I said, that one Vicky Hutchison woman, she later came out and said, yeah, I made everything up. There was another guy that that had done like some juvenile detention time with Damien Echols, and he came out on the stand, and he was saying that that Damien had told him that he's like, oh, I get power by drinking blood out of, boys' penises, and I put their balls in my mouth and stuff. And like I said, you can see it. It's on the documentary. And that kid also, he was a teenager also. He later came out and said that he made it all up.
Of course.
Everybody recanted. Like, all the shit that they, like, all the satanic fucking stories they had, all the, oh, I saw him at a fucking Sabbath or whatever. All of those people came out later and said, yeah, I made it all up. Or the police told me I could get reward money, or I could do this and that. So it really does seem like this is a case of the cops deciding that, oh, well, this guy looks a little bit weird, so he must be a Satanist, so he must have done this. And everything was engineered to get to that end goal.
Yeah, this shit here was done by somebody just from the town. That's all it fucking was.
Like I said, I suspect, and even like, the FBI profiler was like, this looks like a personal murder. It's like, there was no rape, there was no nothing like that. So it wasn't like a serial killer.
How do you have something personal against an 8-year-old though?
That's why I suspect it was maybe a family member.
Yeah.
Because, okay. I mean, and the thing about it, and like I said, I'm not saying anybody in particular, don't sue me. Yeah. I'm just saying that step parents, killing the children of their,
Yeah.
significant other,
get rid of 'em.
that is
Yeah.
not uncommon. You know what I mean? So it is it's actually quite common, in these kind of blended families, for step parents to eliminate the children of their, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying that all the very little physical evidence that they found at the scene points to completely different people than these three people. Like I said, there are still people, and interestingly, two of the families of the murdered boys flipped, and they later said, yeah, we don't think the West Memphis Three are guilty, even though they did at the time. They were super pissed off about it. They wanted to kill them and all this other kind of stuff. It's on the documentary. But two of the families later came around, and said, yeah, no, I think they were railroaded, and that's really sucks. The Moore family, I think they're still kind of holding out, that they think that the West Memphis Three are probably still guilty. But, I mean, according to, like, the shit that I watched with Damien Echols and Henry Rollins said that he had spoken to the mother of Michael Moore. I think her name's Dana. And he's like, look, I'm not trying to, like, make you mad. Or I'm not trying to say, that I got so behind this case, and hopefully, and he's like, she was really pretty cool about it. So she even kind of said, I'm not really sure anymore. So, even like, they've even done, I saw like a fairly recent, like, half an hour, like, news report where they kind of went around like man in the street, and they were asking people in West Memphis, Arkansas nowadays, like, if they thought, then most people thought that they probably were not guilty and that they had been railroaded. So you can see how over the years, and I think the documentaries really helped in that regard, kind of made people change their tune a little bit. And like I said, we've come a long way since 1993. Even though, like I said, I was out of high school by that time. But I still remember there were still these pockets of Satanic Panic bullshit. And it's like I said, Damien Echols didn't even look all that weird. Jason Baldwin didn't look all that weird. He just had kind of a blonde mullet, and he had a Metallica shirt. He just looked like a fucking teenager, man. That's what they all looked like. They made a big deal about Damien Echols. Oh, he had the Book of Shadows. He had like a notebook that he wrote shit in. And they were asking him about it at the trial. Like, a lot of the shit that he wrote in there was just like Metallica lyrics, and some of the shit was from Shakespeare and stuff like that. So it's like they're trying to make him look like evil incarnate. And I was like, he was just like a fucking goth kid, man. It's like everybody did that shit. So I like I said, I think that's why it resonates with a lot of people, particularly people like Henry Rollins and stuff like that, because, people who look different in a small town like that, and how you kind of get shit on, you kind of get suspected of everything, particularly back in those days. But this is a really extreme case where he actually ended up losing 18 years of his life on death row, as and the other two kids too, also 18 years of their life gone, essentially because of how they looked, which is pretty fucked up. But yeah, so you done? You look like you're done.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm cooking.
He's always cooking.
I'm cooking. I got
korma. We're actually recording this a little bit earlier than
I got
usual.
korma coming.
Because we got, oh boy.
Yeah.
So we got to eat that. Yeah. I'm surprised like Pookie hasn't come in here and like put her butt in the camera.
Sleeping in the bowl.
She's taking a nap. Like I said, we're recording this a little bit earlier than usual. It's not evening. It's like actually late afternoon. But we're drinking anyway, because why not? It's fucking Friday. But yeah, so we're going to
quit this bitch.
We're going to wrap up this show about West Memphis 3. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. I'm sure we'll get some entertaining comments about this one, because like I said, this is one that has a lot of really passionate viewpoints on both sides. So we'll see how that goes. But until next time, remember, if you like the show, please like, share, subscribe on all your social media. If you would like to financially support the show, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/13o'clock podcast. Or if you'd like to give a one-time PayPal donation, that would also be much appreciated. You can go to our blog, 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a button in the sidebar that goes to a PayPal account. And he's just over there fucking, you're just cracking me up.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, wait till you close it down, man. Fucking...
Okay.
Wait till you close it
And
down.
that'll do it for episode 199. We will see you next time. Bye.
Okay.